A future baseball star is throwing games on purpose. Everyone thinks he's choking. Deacon Cross knows better. Bottom of the fourth. A Deacon Cross, Florida mystery. Chapter 1. Chalk dust and dried clay coated the chain-link backstop at Terry Park. Heat radiated off the exposed aluminum bleachers in shimmering, distorted waves. The afternoon sun baked the Fort Myers humidity into a suffocating paste, trapping the scent of stale beer and cut grass under a heavy atmospheric lid. Deacon sat in the third row behind home plate. He nursed a paper cup of tepid black coffee. Condensation slicked the cardboard exterior, offering zero comfort against the 90-degree ambient temperature. The bitter liquid tasted like burnt copper and regret. He stretched his right leg across the metal bench in front of him. Ty Cobb's ghost woke up cranky today. Deep aching fire pulsed through the fused bones and thick scar tissue of his ankle. A dozen other talent evaluators occupied the grandstands. They represented $1 billion of corporate equity, but they looked like a collection of sunburned, exhausted traveling salesmen. Clipboards rested on laps. Radar guns pointed toward the pitcher's mound. The air hung thick with unsaid calculations and the quiet scratch of ballpoint pens on scouting forms. Miller, a regional cross-checker for the Detroit organization, sat 2 seats down. The man wiped a gray, sweat-stained towel across the back of his neck. "Tell me again why we sit in a blast furnace to watch a sure thing," Miller said. His voice carried the rough texture of crushed gravel. "Front offices love redundant confirmation," Deacon said. He set the coffee cup on the rusted floorboard. "Fletcher wants an updated report on the bat path. He pays for the rental car, so I watch the bat path." "The kid hits everything," Miller countered. "We know it. You know it. A blind man with a cane knows it. Bobby Reyes goes in the first round. He buys his mother a mansion in July." "Things change," Deacon said. "Nothing changes 110-mile-an-hour exit velocity." Miller pointed a thick finger toward the home dugout. "The kid is a freak of nature." Bobby Reyes stood in the on-deck circle. 18 years old. A center fielder built like a middleweight boxer. Lean coiled muscle wrapped around a 6'2" frame. Pine tar stained the handle of his composite bat. He swung the heavy barrel in a loose, terrifying arc. The mechanics looked flawless from a distance. The hips fired in perfect synchronization with the shoulders. The kinetic chain transferred maximum violent energy through the wrists. He projected the aura of a franchise cornerstone, a generation-defining talent hidden in the Florida swamps, waiting for the corporate machine to hand over a multi-million-dollar signing bonus. A high school showcase tournament brought the scouts to this crumbling stadium. The local district assembled a patchwork roster of junior college transfers and high school seniors to face the elite travel teams. It offered a mismatch of epic proportions. The stadium public address system crackled. "A bored teenager," announced the next batter. Reyes walked toward home plate. He did not strut. He kept his head down, staring at the chalk lines. His cleats crunched against the dry earth of the batter's box. He dug his back foot into the dirt, establishing a deep, aggressive foundation. A mediocre junior college transfer stood on the pitching mound. The pitcher wore a baggy polyester uniform and a panicked expression. Sweat plastered dark hair to his forehead. He had an 82-mile-per-hour fastball and a looping, ineffective curve. A lamb led to the slaughter. The umpire pointed a thick finger at the pitcher. "Play ball." Deacon leaned forward. He ignored the throbbing in his ankle. He ignored the suffocating heat. He narrowed his focus to the geometric space between the pitcher's release point and the batter's hips. The pitcher started a frantic, disjointed wind-up. He threw all upper body, dragging his back leg across the mound. The baseball left his hand in a desperate aiming motion. Pitch 1. A flat curveball in the dirt. Reyes did not flinch. He tracked the spin out of the hand and let the ball bury itself in the catcher's mitt. The umpire called a ball. "Kid has eyes like a hawk," Miller muttered, scribbling a note on his clipboard. Recognized the rotation out of the sleeve. "He saw it," Deacon agreed. The catcher tossed the baseball back to the mound. The pitcher wiped his face with the back of his glove. He shook off 2 signs. He nodded at the third. The pitcher went into the wind-up. Pitch 2. A fastball aimed at the outside corner, missing inside by 4 inches. The pitch cruised toward the letters on Reyes's jersey. Reyes triggered his swing. The initial movement showcased the elite explosive bat speed. The front foot planted. The hips opened with terrifying rotational force. But the kinetic chain broke down in the final microsecond. Deacon watched the anomaly unfold. Reyes dropped his hands. He made a deliberate, conscious choice to lower the knob of the bat 3 inches before the barrel crossed the plate. The slight deviation destroyed the launch angle. The violent uppercut caught nothing but humid Florida air. The bat whiffed over the baseball, spinning Reyes off balance. Strike 1. Miller scoffed. Ugly. He guessed changeup. Pulled his weight forward. Elite hitters do not guess on 82, Deacon said. Everyone gets fooled once in a while, Diak. Deacon kept his mouth shut. He read the mechanics. He read the physics of the human body. Reyes did not get fooled. The kid sabotaged the swing. The dropped hands required active effort to overcome the natural muscle memory. It looked engineered to fail. Reyes stepped out of the box. He adjusted his batting gloves, tearing at the Velcro straps with frantic, jerky motions. He refused to look toward the scouts sitting behind the chain-link fence. He stared out at the center field wall, his chest heaving under the moisture-wicking fabric of his jersey. The kid returned to the chalk outline. He raised the bat, resting the barrel on his right shoulder. The pitcher received the sign. He gained a fraction of false confidence from the swinging strike. He wound up and delivered the payoff pitch. Pitch 3. A fastball right down the pipe. The baseball floated toward home plate at 82 miles per hour. A batting practice meatball. A pitch designed to end up in the parking lot beyond the left field bleachers. Reyes froze. The bat stayed glued to his shoulder. His hips remained locked. He watched the red seams spin across the absolute heart of the plate. He did not initiate a single twitch of offensive movement. The baseball popped into the catcher's leather webbing. Strike 3, the umpire bellowed, punching the humid air with a dramatic fist. A collective groan echoed across the scouting section. Men clicked their pens and shook their heads. The generational talent just struck out, looking against a community college arm-throwing batting practice velocity. "Well," Miller said, tossing his clipboard onto the aluminum bench. "That costs him about $100,000 in leverage. Horrible pitch recognition." Deacon ignored the rival scout. He watched Reyes. The kid turned away from the plate. He walked back to the concrete dugout. He did not slam his bat against the rack. He did not curse the umpire. He did not kick a batting helmet across the floor. Deacon read the body language. He evaluated the hidden tells of athletes dealing with failure. A proud, elite hitter striking out on a bad pitch radiated fury. Anger flushed the skin and tightened the jaw. Reyes radiated none of that. The kid's shoulders hitched with a rigid, unnatural tension. He sat down on the far end of the wooden dugout bench, isolating himself from his teammates. He buried his face in a damp towel. His hands shook. Fear rolled off the 18-year-old in visible, heavy waves. Reyes looked terrified, not overmatched. The strikeout brought him zero frustration, only a grim, crushing relief. The kid executed a specific task. He went to the plate with a mandate to fail. Deacon rubbed his scarred jawline. He stared at the desolate figure sitting in the dugout shadows. The corporate machine evaluated radar numbers and exit velocities. Chicago wanted a spreadsheet filled with positive metrics. Fletcher hated anomalies. But Deacon lived in the anomalies. The shoe-leather detective work started the moment the math stopped making sense. A kid with $1 million future does not tank his own draft stock for fun. A kid that talented does not drop his hands on a fastball without a loaded gun pointed at his career. Someone applied pressure. Someone squeezed the kid. Deacon reached down and picked up his tepid coffee. He took a sip, letting the bitter taste coat his mouth. He needed a closer look at the Reyes family. He needed to find the source of the fear. He packed his notebook into his canvas duffel bag, leaving the rest of the scouts to debate the failed at-bat. The game on the field meant nothing. The real game played out in the shadows, and Bobby Reyes was losing badly. Chapter 2. Industrial carpet cleaner masked the ghost of 1,000 stale cigarettes inside room 114. The chemical lemon scent burned the back of Deacon's throat. An ancient air conditioning unit sat wedged into the cinder-block wall beneath a single, grime-streaked window. The metal housing rattled a relentless, chaotic rhythm, vibrating the cheap drywall. It fought a losing battle against the Florida heat, spitting a meager stream of lukewarm, ozone-scented air into the cramped space. Deacon sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. Rusty springs groaned in protest under his weight. He untied the laces of his right leather boot. He braced his jaw and pulled the heavy footwear free. Ty Cobb's ghost demanded a steep payment for the afternoon spent on the aluminum bleachers at Terry Park. Deep, branching lines of fire radiated from the fused bones of his ankle. He grabbed a plastic ice machine bag from the faux wood nightstand. Freezing condensation soaked through his khaki pant leg as he pressed the bag against the inflamed scar tissue. The dull ache provided a familiar anchor. He closed his eyes, letting the cold seep into the joint. A silver laptop sat open on a small laminate desk across the room. The harsh blue light of the screen cast long, distorted shadows over the peeling floral wallpaper. The Chicago front office scouting portal filled the monitor. Bobby Reyes's profile stared back at him. Rows of pristine metrics populated the digital file. Elite exit velocities. ++ sprint speeds. Terrifying rotational acceleration. The algorithms painted a picture of a perfect machine, built to anchor a major league outfield for a decade. Yet, a glaring anomaly tainted the bottom of the page. The final entry from the afternoon showcase sat highlighted in yellow. One strikeout looking. 82 miles per hour. Pitch location, middle. A harsh vibration shattered the white noise of the rattling air conditioner. Deacon's cell phone danced across the laminate desk, threatening to vibrate right over the edge. The digital screen glared in the dim room. The caller ID flashed a Chicago area code. The corporate machine never slept, and it had zero respect for time zones or exhaustion. He left the ice pack on his leg. He limped the 2 steps to the desk, favoring the bad ankle, and snatched the phone from the surface. He swiped the green icon and pressed the cold metal to his ear. "Drop him," Fletcher said. The front office executive bypassed any semblance of a greeting. Background noise filtered through the connection, carrying the hum of central air and the clatter of keyboards from the analytics bullpen on the 42nd floor of a Chicago skyscraper. "Good evening to you too, Fletch," Deacon said. "I love a warm hello." "I just reviewed the raw feed from the Terry Park showcase," Fletcher continued. His voice carried the abrasive texture of grinding gears. "The kid struck out looking on a batting practice fastball. He froze. A junior college transfer embarrassed him in front of every scout in the Grapefruit League. The pitcher got lucky, Deacon lied, testing the waters. Luck plays zero part in our models, Fletcher snapped. The analytics guys ran the biomechanical breakdown from the center field camera. They hate the numbers. The bat speed decelerated. The hip rotation stopped. The expected batting average on that specific pitch location is 900. Reyes kept the bat on his shoulder. He looked lost. Deacon leaned his hip against the edge of the desk. He stared at the blinking cursor on the laptop screen. He dropped his hands on the pitch before that. He engineered the failure. The kid sabotaged his own bat. Silence stretched across the cellular connection. A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. You sound insane, Deacon. A first-round prospect does not tank his draft stock for fun. Millions of dollars sit on the table. He looked terrified, Deacon said. He pictured the kid sitting alone in the dark corner of the concrete dugout, buried under a damp towel. Fear radiated off him. Someone put a squeeze on the kid. Someone applied pressure. I don't care about his feelings. I care about the data. Fletcher slapped a hand against a desk in Chicago. The sound echoed hollow over the phone line. The general manager wants a sure thing with this pick. He wants a cornerstone. We draft hitters with elite pitch recognition. We do not draft kids who freeze on 82. Reyes recognized the pitch out of the hand, Deacon argued. He tracked the spin. I watched his eyes. He knew exactly what crossed the plate. Then he lacks the killer instinct. Even worse. Cross him off the board. Give me a week. Excuse me? Give me 7 days, Deacon repeated. He picked up a chewed ballpoint pen from the desk and rolled it between his fingers. I need time to figure out the anomaly. The kid possesses generational talent. You cross him off now, Miami or Atlanta steals a franchise player in the second round. Let me dig into the background. Let me find the source of the pressure. We evaluate bat paths, Deacon. We don't run a psychology ward. The human element matters. The kid is 18 years old. The human element is a liability, Fletcher countered. The executive tone shifted from irritation to absolute frigid authority. The algorithm removes the risk. The algorithm protects the investment. Reyes flagged the system today. The system says pass. The system is blind to a loaded gun. Stop playing detective, Fletcher warned. Your job involves radar guns and stopwatches. You verify the metrics. You send the reports. The front office makes the decisions. Deacon squeezed the plastic pen. The cheap casing cracked under the pressure of his thumb. He tossed the broken pieces into a small metal trash can beside the desk. The corporate gears demanded bloodless efficiency. They viewed players as commodities, lines of code on a spreadsheet. A terrified kid meant nothing to a billionaire owner chasing a pennant. I refuse to burn a generational talent over one forced strikeout, Deacon said. You cross a dangerous line, Fletcher said. The owner wants compliance. I want a clean draft board by Monday morning. You keep digging into this kid. You waste company time. I put a formal reprimand in your file. Put 2, Deacon said. I like to collect them. You throw away a pension, Deacon. You throw away the health insurance. Good luck fixing that shattered ankle on a minor league coach's salary. Do not make me replace you. Send the reprimand, Fletch. The kid stays on my board. Deacon pulled the phone away from his face. He tapped the red button, cutting the connection. The screen went dark, plunging the room back into the dim glow of the laptop monitor and the neon sign flashing outside the window. The silence of the motel room felt heavy. The rattling air conditioner masked the distant hum of traffic on Route 41. He tossed the cell phone onto the mattress. It bounced once and settled near the melting bag of ice. He turned back to the laptop. The flawless metrics of Bobby Reyes mocked him from the screen. A kid that good carried a target on his back. A multi-million-dollar signing bonus attracted parasites. Agents, financial advisors, distant relatives, and local predators all wanted a piece of the pie. Fort Myers harbored a specific breed of swamp creature, the kind that thrived on the desperation of others. Someone held a blade to the kid's throat. Deacon rubbed his scarred jawline. The stubble felt rough against his palm. The front office abandoned Reyes, writing the kid off as a statistical anomaly. The machine moved on to the next shiny prospect. Deacon understood the corporate logic, but his gut rejected the outcome. The shoe-leather detective work beckoned. He needed to find the invisible hand pulling the strings. He needed a starting point. The pristine high school records offered zero clues. The official scouting reports lacked any mention of off-field trouble. To find the rot, he needed to wade into the mud. He needed the local whispers, the dive bar gossip, and the ugly truths hidden behind the manicured baseball diamonds. He looked at his throbbing ankle. The ice melted, pooling water on the bedspread. The pain flared, a constant bitter companion. He understood pain, and he understood the desperate measures men took to avoid it. Reyes chose the strikeout to avoid a worse fate. Deacon closed the laptop. The sudden darkness felt absolute. He grabbed his wallet and his keys from the desk. Fletcher threatened the pension and the paycheck, but the executive had zero jurisdiction over a scout's conscience. The corporate machine wanted obedience. Deacon planned to deliver chaos. He walked out of the room, leaving the rattling air conditioner behind. He needed a drink, and he needed a conversation with a man who knew the darkest corners of the city. Chapter 3. Flickering pink neon painted long, jagged shadows across a cracked asphalt parking lot. The humming glass tubes spelled out the name of the Mangrove Lounge, though the last two letters remained dark. Heat radiated from the pavement, baking the night air into a thick paste. Mosquitoes swarmed the glowing sign, drawn to the artificial warmth. Deacon killed the engine of the rented Chevy Malibu. He grabbed his wallet from the center console and stepped out of the chilled cabin into the muggy darkness. Crickets droned a relentless, vibrating rhythm from the overgrown drainage ditch out back. The stench of red tide drifted inland from the Caloosahatchee River, smelling of spoiled sulfur and dead mullet. A heavy wooden door marked the entrance. Tarnished brass formed a handle shaped like a mermaid. Deacon yanked the metal. Frigid air blasted his face, carrying the scent of stale draft beer, fried onions, and decades of spilled bourbon. A jukebox played a scratchy Willie Nelson track in the corner. Smoke hung near the water-stained ceiling tiles. Fort Myers operated on an older set of rules, and the smoking ban meant nothing inside these cinder-block walls. Deacon let the heavy door swing shut. The noise of Route 41 vanished. The lounge featured a long mahogany bar, scarred by bottle caps and careless elbows. Stools with duct-taped vinyl cushions lined the counter. A few regulars occupied the dark corners, staring into their glasses with dead eyes. The bartender wiped the wood with a gray rag, ignoring the new arrival. Scanning the room, Deacon found his target in a back booth. Henderson sat bathed in the dim light of a fake Tiffany lamp. The retired minor league umpire nursed a highball glass. Ice clinked against the crystal rim. Henderson wore a faded Guayabera shirt, the loose fabric hiding a heavy gut. Liver spots dotted his bald head. Deep creases framed his eyes, carved into the skin by 30 years of staring through a steel face mask in the midday sun. Deacon walked toward the booth. His right boot dragged a fraction of an inch on the sticky linoleum. The fused bones in his ankle ground out a familiar warning. He ignored the pain and slid into the opposite side of the booth. Rusted springs sagged under his weight. The cracked red leather felt cool against his khaki pants. Henderson took a sip of his amber liquid. He set the glass down and studied Deacon across the scarred table. "You look like 10 miles of bad road," Henderson said. His voice had the texture of crushed gravel. "Corporate life agrees with me," Deacon said. A waitress materialized from the shadows. She held a round plastic tray against her hip and smacked a damp paper napkin onto the table. "What's the poison?" she asked. "Double Maker's Mark," Deacon said. "Neat. Keep a tab." He tossed the silver corporate card onto the table. The plastic landed with a heavy clatter. Henderson eyed the embossed Chicago logo. "The front office pays for your sins now?" Henderson asked. "Fletcher thinks he owns my soul." Deacon pocketed the card after the waitress snatched it. "He buys the booze. I buy the lies." "You look older than the last time you dragged yourself through this swamp," Henderson noted. "Mirrors lie. I feel fantastic." Deacon leaned back against the vinyl. "How is the strike zone these days?" "Wide and generous, just like my ex-wife." Henderson coughed, a sound rattling deep in his chest. "I miss the dirt, Diak. I miss the arguments with angry managers. These new kids lack fire. They step out of the box and stare at the iPad in the dugout. The game changed. The game died." Henderson traced a water ring on the table with a thick finger. "They optimized the soul right out of it. Analytics. Spin rates. Launch angles. Computers run the front offices. It makes me sick." "You called a terrible game in Pawtucket back in '04, Deacon said. Henderson snorted. "You crowded the plate. That curveball caught the outside corner. A blind man saw it. It missed by 6 inches. You swung like a rusty gate anyway. You had 0 plate discipline. I hit .280 that year." "In Triple-A," Henderson corrected. "The big leagues exposed your bat speed. Then Cleveland ruined your leg. Now you carry a clipboard for the suits. We all sell out, Hendy. You retired to a bar stool. I retired to a rental car." The waitress returned. She set the double bourbon in front of Deacon. He nodded his thanks and raised the heavy glass. The liquor burned a welcome trail down his throat. The tight knot behind his eyes loosened a fraction. The headache backed off, surrendering to the alcohol. "I didn't come to mourn the sport, Hendy. Nobody comes to see me to mourn." Henderson finished his drink. He rattled the ice cubes. "You want a rumor. You want a ghost. Which one is it?" "A kid," Deacon said. "Bobby Reyes." Henderson stopped rattling his glass. His eyes narrowed. The ambient noise of the bar seemed to drop. Willie Nelson faded into a low guitar solo. The compressor on the beer cooler kicked on with a loud hum. "Reyes," Henderson repeated. The name hung in the damp air. "You know him." "Everybody in Lee County knows him. Kid hits baseballs into orbit." "He struck out looking today," Deacon said. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the sticky table. 82-mile-per-hour fastball. Middle of the plate. He dropped his hands on the pitch before it. He engineered the failure. Kids guess wrong. A generational talent does not guess wrong on batting practice heat. Deacon took another sip of bourbon. Fear rolled off him in the dugout. He looked terrified. "The math stopped making sense, Hendy. A kid 1 month away from a multi-million-dollar signing bonus does not tank his own stock." Henderson sighed. He rubbed a hand over his face. "You stick your nose in this, you lose it. The front office wants the exit velocities. Give them the numbers. Cash your paycheck. Fletcher wants a clean report. He expects me to rubber stamp the kid or drop him entirely. Deacon set his glass down. Someone pointed a loaded gun at the kid's career. I need the source of the pressure. Henderson signaled the waitress. He pointed to his empty glass. She nodded from across the room. The kid stays clean, Henderson said. He kept his voice low. Bobby spends all his time in the batting cages. But blood ties you to the anchor, Diak. You look at the family. Give me the gossip. Bobby has an older brother. Hector. Henderson drummed his thick fingers on the table. Hector inherited the old man's landscaping business a few years back. The old man built a solid route. Wealthy clients out on Sanibel Island. But Hector lacks the work ethic. He bought fancy trucks. He bought new commercial mowers. He missed payments. The business went into the red. Debt makes a man desperate, Deacon said. Hector went to the bank. The bank laughed at him. The waitress delivered a fresh highball. Henderson took a long drag. So Hector went to the secondary market. He went to the shadow bank. A loan shark. A predator, Henderson corrected. A guy named Vargas. He runs a sprawling dirt lot used car dealership out on Route 41. Suncoast Motors. Sells rusted sedans to desperate people at 30% interest. He uses the car lot as a front for sports betting and extortion. The picture crystallized in Deacon's mind. The pieces locked into a grim, familiar pattern. A struggling older brother borrows dirty money to save a dying business. The interest compounds. The debt swallows him whole. The mobster realizes the brother possesses zero assets, but the family possesses a winning lottery ticket. Vargas bought the brother's debt, Deacon said. Vargas owns the brother, Henderson said. And now he squeezes the golden goose. Word on the street says Vargas forced Hector to sign over a percentage of Bobby's future earnings. A predatory sports management contract. Deacon frowned. Major League Baseball voids those contracts. A street thug cannot register as an official agent. Vargas understands the rules. He plays a different game. Henderson leaned closer across the table. If Bobby gets drafted in the first round, the league scrutinizes everything. The background checks flag Vargas. The whole deal blows up in the mobster's face. So Vargas forces the kid to tank. Deacon rubbed his scarred jaw. Exactly. Bobby drops down the draft board. He falls into the late rounds. The signing bonus shrinks. But Vargas runs an independent league pipeline. He funnels undrafted, desperate kids to shady winter leagues in the Dominican Republic and Mexico. He takes 90% of their paychecks. If Bobby goes undrafted, Vargas owns his entire career without the MLB looking over his shoulder. The sheer cruelty of the scheme chilled the humid air of the bar. Vargas planned to destroy $1 million future to secure a steady stream of dirty pennies. The mobster held the brother hostage, forcing the phenom to choose between his family's safety and his own dream. The strikeout-looking, Deacon murmured. Bobby chose the brother. The kid pays the toll, Henderson said. You stay away from Suncoast Motors, Diak. The people running that operation employ guys with thick necks and bad attitudes. They break legs for fun. I evaluate talent, Deacon said. I verify the metrics. You play detective. You dig around in the dark, you find snakes. Deacon finished his bourbon. The liquor burned in his stomach. He stood up. The pressure change in the bar sent a jolt of pure fire up his calf. He masked the wince with a cough, keeping his expression neutral. The corporate machine wanted radar numbers. Vargas wanted blood money. Bobby Reyes stood trapped in the middle of the vice. I appreciate the intel, Hendy. Watch your back, Scout. Deacon dropped a $20 bill on the table to cover the tip. He turned and walked toward the exit. The neon sign buzzed through the small square window in the heavy door. He pushed the wood open. The humid Florida night hit him like a physical blow. The parking lot remained empty, except for his rental sedan. A stray dog scavenged near the overflowing dumpster in the alleyway. Deacon limped to the car. The streetlights painted the hood in a sickly yellow hue. He unlocked the door. The interior smelled of hot plastic and cheap pine air freshener. He dropped into the driver's seat and kept the engine off. He understood the extortion game. Vargas held the leverage. The mobster owned Hector's debt, which meant he controlled Bobby's swing. Deacon needed to see the pressure applied in real time. He needed to track the kid away from the baseball diamond and find the physical link between the prospect and the predator. He turned the ignition key. The engine roared to life. Cold air blasted from the dashboard vents, offering a brief reprieve from the swamp outside. He shifted the transmission into drive. The tires crunched over the loose gravel of the parking lot. Tomorrow required a stakeout. Bobby Reyes attended a local high school. Kids with massive burdens always carried the weight in the open, away from the stadium lights. Deacon steered the sedan toward the highway, ready to watch the shadows gather around a generational talent. Chapter 4. Fat drops of rain hammered the roof of the rented Chevy Malibu. The sound resembled a handful of gravel tossed against a tin drum. A sudden, violent squall blew in from the Gulf, turning the late afternoon sky the color of bruised iron. Water sheeted down the windshield, blurring the outside world into gray shapes. The wiper blades fought a losing battle against the deluge. They squeaked across the glass in a rhythmic, irritating beat. Deacon sat in the driver's seat. He kept the engine running, needing the defroster to fight the condensation fogging the windows. The cabin smelled of damp wool, cheap pine air freshener, and stale coffee. He rubbed his scarred right ankle. The drop in barometric pressure caused the fused bones to ache with a dull, persistent throb. He ignored the pain and kept his gaze locked on the high school parking lot. The asphalt stretched out like a shallow lake. Puddles formed in the depressions, rippling under the heavy rain. Beyond the lot, the chain-link fence of the baseball diamond stood barely visible through the gray curtain. Practice ended 20 minutes ago. A lone figure emerged from the athletic complex. Bobby Reyes walked with his head down, the collar of his windbreaker pulled up against the storm. He carried a heavy canvas equipment bag slung over his left shoulder. The kid lacked the strut of a future first-round draft pick. He moved with the weary shuffle of a man carrying a heavy burden. Deacon reached across the center console. His fingers closed around the cold, textured grip of the Nikon DSLR camera resting on the passenger seat. He pulled the heavy device into his lap. He popped the plastic lens cap off and set it in the cup holder. Bobby sloshed through the puddles. He headed toward a rusted silver Honda Civic, parked under the weak glow of a solitary sodium street lamp. The car looked ancient, held together by duct tape and blind faith. The kid reached the driver's side door and dug into his pocket for the keys. Headlights cut through the gloom. A massive, lifted black Ford F-250 roared out of a side alley. The truck bypassed the designated driving lanes. It cut a sharp, diagonal path across the lot, sending a wave of dirty rainwater washing over the asphalt. The driver stomped on the brakes. The heavy vehicle skidded to a halt, stopping inches away from the front bumper of the Honda Civic. The truck blocked the exit path completely. Deacon rolled down his window. A blast of wet, cold air hit his face. The rain blew into the cabin, soaking the sleeve of his polo shirt. He ignored the discomfort. He rested the barrel of the telephoto lens on the door frame. He pressed his eye to the viewfinder and twisted the focus ring. The driver's door of the Ford swung open. A man stepped out into the downpour. He had the build of a retired middle linebacker who transitioned into debt collection. Thick ropes of muscle strained against a tight black t-shirt. A dark, jagged tattoo crawled up the left side of his thick neck, disappearing behind his earlobe. He ignored the rain. The man walked toward the Honda Civic. Bobby froze. The kid dropped the canvas equipment bag into a puddle. He backed up, pressing his spine against the rusted door of the sedan. Fear radiated from his posture, visible even through the digital lens. The man closed the distance. He did not throw a punch. He did not raise his hands. He simply invaded the kid's personal space. He leaned in, placing one massive hand on the roof of the Honda, trapping Bobby between the car and his own chest. Deacon clicked the shutter button. The camera fired a rapid burst of frames. The mechanical clatter of the shutter vanished beneath the drumming rain. Deacon framed the shot tightly. He captured the fear in Bobby's eyes and the aggressive, looming posture of the collector. He read the body language. The man spoke in a low, continuous rumble, the words lost to the storm. The tone conveyed absolute, unyielding authority. Bobby nodded frantically. He reached a trembling hand inside his windbreaker. He pulled a thick, brown, manila envelope from an inner pocket. The paper looked bulky, stuffed tight with contents. He held it out, offering it to the man like a peace offering. Deacon held his breath. He adjusted the zoom. He snapped another sequence of photos, documenting the exact moment the envelope traded hands. The transfer of leverage. The man snatched the envelope. He shoved it into the front pocket of his jeans. He leaned closer, whispering one final sentence into the kid's ear. Bobby squeezed his eyes shut, his jaw clamped tight. The man stepped back. He patted the roof of the Honda Civic twice, a mocking gesture of finality. He turned and walked back to the lifted truck. Deacon shifted his aim. He tracked the back of the black t-shirt. He followed the man to the driver's side door. As the man climbed into the cab, Deacon panned the lens downward, locking onto the rear bumper of the Ford. He focused on the Florida license plate. He fired 5 more shots, ensuring clarity through the streaks of rain running down the glass. The numbers burned into the digital memory card. The truck's engine roared. Exhaust smoke plumed from the tailpipe. The driver threw the transmission into reverse, backed up a few feet, and then sped out of the parking lot, leaving the Honda Civic behind. Bobby Reyes stood alone in the rain. The kid slowly opened the driver's door of his car. He collapsed into the seat, leaving the door ajar for a long moment. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against the steering wheel. Deacon lowered the camera. He rolled his window back up, sealing the cabin against the storm. The sound of the rain returned to a muffled drumbeat. He wiped the moisture from the camera body with the hem of his shirt. He pressed the playback button and reviewed the images on the digital screen. The clarity held up. The fear in the kid's face looked undeniable. The manila envelope looked heavy. The license plate numbers read perfectly. The front office in Chicago demanded data. Fletcher evaluated spreadsheets and launch angles. They ignored the human element until the human element affected the bottom line. Deacon now had visual proof of an external variable. Someone applied a physical squeeze to $1 million asset. The strikeout looking at Terry Park made perfect, terrifying sense. He placed the camera on the passenger seat. The extortion pattern looked standard. A struggling family, a predatory loan, a desperate payoff in a dark parking lot. But the scale felt wrong. A kid 1 month away from a first-round draft selection represented massive future capital. A street-level loan shark usually lacked the patience to wait for a signing bonus. They wanted cash now. The manila envelope proved Hector made payments. But the strikeout proved Vargas wanted more than just interest. The mobster wanted control of the asset itself. Deacon needed a name to attach to the neck tattoo. He needed a registered address for the lifted truck. The official databases locked him out. He lacked a badge and a precinct. He needed local connections, the kind forged outside the law and the corporate system. He dropped the transmission into drive. He steered the Malibu out of the high school parking lot, leaving Bobby Reyes to his misery. The rain continued to fall, washing the grime from the streets but doing nothing to clean the rot hiding underneath. Deacon navigated toward the coast, heading for the stench of the red tide and a conversation with the only person in Fort Myers who hated the system as much as he did. Chapter 5. A thick, metallic stench blanketed the municipal marina. It smelled of spoiled sulfur, rotting vegetation, and the sweet, heavy scent of decaying marine life. The red tide bloom pushed a massive mat of dead silver mullet against the concrete seawall. The incoming tide trapped the carcasses in a frothy brown paste. Even the seagulls abandoned the basin, refusing to scavenge the poisoned meat. Deacon parked the rented Malibu in a gravel lot meant for boat trailers. Deep craters dotted the dirt, filled with brackish rainwater from the afternoon squall. He killed the engine and stepped out of the air-conditioned cabin. The humidity hit his lungs like a wet wool blanket. He grabbed a brown paper bag from the passenger seat and shut the car door. A network of weathered wooden docks stretched into the brown river water. Splintered pilings groaned under the relentless push of the current. Deacon navigated the main pier. His right boot tested the warped planks before he committed his full weight. The fused bones in his ankle ground together, protesting the uneven surface. Ty Cobb's ghost demanded payment for the time spent standing in the rain at the high school. He ignored the throbbing and focused on the rows of tied-up vessels. He spotted the eco-charter skiff at the end of Dock C. A faded canvas canopy provided a rectangle of shade over the center console. The shallow draft hull featured streaks of dried salt and river mud. Gwen stood on the bow. She wore cut-off denim shorts and a grease-stained gray tank top. A weathered baseball cap held back a tangled mass of sun-bleached blonde hair. She wrestled a long-handled deck brush, scrubbing the non-skid fiberglass surface with aggressive, rhythmic strokes. Soapy water spilled over the scuppers, mixing with the toxic foam in the basin. Deacon stopped at the edge of her slip. Gwen paused her scrubbing. She leaned the brush against the console and pushed a pair of mirrored Costa sunglasses up onto the bill of her cap. She evaluated the rumpled polo shirt, the khaki pants, and the battered leather boots. "The EPA took their water samples yesterday," Gwen said. Her voice carried the raspy texture of coarse sandpaper. "They told me the red tide is a naturally occurring phenomenon. They told me the agricultural runoff from the lake has zero impact." "I evaluate fastballs," Deacon said. "I leave the algae to the scientists." "Then you lost your way, Scout. The baseball diamonds sit 3 miles east." She picked the brush back up. "I don't run tours today. The tourists hate the smell of dead fish. It ruins their vacation selfies." "I hate selfies," Deacon said. He stepped over the gap, favoring his left leg. He landed on the fiberglass deck. The skiff rocked under the sudden shift in weight. His bad ankle barked, sending a dull ache up his calf. He found a seat on a cracked vinyl cooler strapped to the deck near the console. "I run a private vessel," Gwen said. She kept her eyes on the deck, pushing a puddle of soapy water toward the scupper. "I charge by the hour." Deacon opened the brown paper bag. He pulled out a bottle of Woodford Reserve. The heavy glass caught the harsh afternoon sunlight. The amber liquid glowed against the backdrop of the murky river. "Chicago pays for my expenses," Deacon said. He set the bottle on the top of the console, next to a mounted GPS unit. Fletcher thinks high-end bourbon greases the wheels of amateur athletics. I think it buys local geography. Gwen stopped scrubbing. She stared at the bottle. She had zero respect for corporate wealth, but she respected a quality distillation. Henderson talks too much, Gwen said. Henderson said, you know the backwater better than the Coast Guard. He said, you know the people who operate in the mud. Deacon leaned back against the console railing. I need a license plate run. I need an address. Gwen crossed her arms. You carry a platinum credit card. Hire a private investigator. They have databases. A PI leaves a digital footprint. A PI files an invoice with a description of services rendered. Deacon rubbed his scarred jawline. My front office evaluates exit velocities. They hate anomalies. They hate missing mechanics. They fire scouts who spend company time digging into extortion rings. You found an extortion ring on a baseball diamond. I found a kid with $1 million swing tanking his own draft stock. Deacon pointed a finger toward the bottle. A guy with a thick neck tattoo cornered the kid in a high school parking lot yesterday. The kid handed over a heavy envelope. The guy drove away in a lifted black Ford F-250. Gwen sighed. She tossed the deck brush into a plastic bucket. She walked over to the console and picked up the bourbon. She broke the paper seal with her thumbnail and unscrewed the cork. She took a long pull straight from the bottle, bypassing a glass. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. The local ecosystem decays from the inside out. The river chokes on nitrogen. The kids choke on debt. It all flows downstream. I need the registered owner of the truck. I know a girl at the county DMV, Gwen said. We play softball on Thursdays. She hates the system as much as you do. Gwen reached into the pocket of her denim shorts and pulled out a cell phone in a waterproof case. Give me the plate. Deacon pulled his notebook from his back pocket. He flipped past pages of scouting codes and mechanical breakdowns. He read the 6-digit alphanumeric sequence aloud. Gwen dialed a number. She turned her back to Deacon, staring out across the poisoned river. She spoke in low, hushed tones, trading rapid-fire Spanish with the woman on the other end of the line. She nodded twice, ended the call, and shoved the phone back into her pocket. Suncoast Motors, Gwen said. She turned around and leaned against the gunnel. The truck registers to a commercial lot out on Route 41. A dirt lot dealership specializing in high-interest loans and rusted sedans. Deacon closed the notebook. The pieces aligned perfectly with Henderson's dive bar intel. Vargas operated the loan sharking business behind the facade of the car dealership. The lifted truck belonged to the fleet. The neck tattoo goon served as the collection agent. Vargas, Deacon said. Gwen stiffened. She tightened her grip on the neck of the bourbon bottle. You play a dangerous game, Scout. Vargas runs a sprawling operation. He deals in sports betting, predatory lending, and marine theft. He employs men who break bones for a living. They do not care about your corporate expense account. I care about the kid, Deacon said. Vargas holds a predatory management contract. He forces the kid to tank, ruining the draft stock. If the kid goes undrafted, Vargas owns his entire career in the independent leagues. He takes 90% of the paychecks. You want to save a baseball player. Gwen took another sip of the bourbon. I want to save the estuary. We fight different wars, Deacon. We fight the same rot. Deacon stood up from the cooler. His ankle delivered a sharp protest. He ignored the pain. I appreciate the intel, Gwen. You need a plan, Gwen warned. You walk onto that car lot asking questions. You end up in the trunk of a rusted sedan at the bottom of a canal. I evaluate talent, Deacon said. I plan to evaluate the inventory. He stepped over the gap and landed on the wooden dock. The warped planks groaned under his boots. He left the bottle of Woodford Reserve on the console. The transaction concluded. He had the location of the enemy. Deacon limped back up the main pier, leaving the eco-charter captain and the stench of the red tide behind. The shoe-leather detective work demanded a change of wardrobe. He needed to shed the weary scout persona. He needed to become the arrogant corporate buyer. Tomorrow, he planned to visit Suncoast Motors and meet the predator face to face. Chapter 6. I need 6 extended wheelbase cargo vans, Deacon said. He tapped the edge of the platinum corporate card against the baking hood of a sun-bleached Hyundai sedan. I need the engines running. I need the titles clear. I need them delivered to the Hammond Stadium loading dock by Tuesday morning. The salesman stared at the raised silver numbers on the plastic card. A thick layer of perspiration coated the man's forehead. Grease stained the collar of his mustard-yellow short-sleeved dress shirt. He had the nervous, erratic energy of a man accustomed to selling predatory loans to desperate people, not dealing with institutional wealth. A plastic name tag pinned to his chest pocket read, Gary. 6 vans, Gary repeated. He wiped his brow with the back of a damp hand. That takes inventory. We run a retail lot here, mister. We don't do fleet sales. Everything is a fleet sale when the check clears, Deacon said. He slipped the card back into the inside pocket of his charcoal wool suit jacket. The tailored fabric felt like a canvas straitjacket in the brutal midday heat. Sunlight hammered the cracked asphalt of Suncoast Motors, radiating upward and turning the air into a shimmering, distorted lens. Strings of faded triangular pennants snapped in the stagnant, hot breeze overhead. Deacon ignored the sweat pooling at the base of his spine. The suit functioned as armor. It projected authority, wealth, and absolute impatience. He locked his knees, keeping his weight balanced to hide the severe limp. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a dull, rhythmic ache through the fused bones of his right ankle, demanding a cold compress and a bottle of pills. Chicago sent me down here to solve a logistics problem, Deacon continued. He pitched his voice to carry over the roar of passing traffic on Route 41. Our minor league affiliates burn through transport vehicles every summer. The front office hates the rental agencies. They want owned assets. I possess the authorization to buy out your backlot today. Gary looked past Deacon, scanning the rows of rusted sedans and dented pickup trucks. The lot represented the bottom rung of the automotive food chain. Suncoast Motors specialized in 30% interest rates and guaranteed repossessions. I gotta check the computer, Gary mumbled. He retreated a step toward the cinder block main office building. I gotta see what we have in the back. Take me to the owner, Deacon said. Mr. Vargas handles the financing. I handle the lot. Deacon closed the distance between them. He invaded the salesman's personal space, using his height and the sharp cut of the corporate suit to intimidate the smaller man. I don't negotiate with guys wearing plastic name tags, Gary, Deacon said. The weary, cynical edge of his scout persona bled into the dialogue. I buy in bulk. I need a signature from the top of the letterhead. Take me to Vargas, or I take this expense account down the highway to the Ford dealership. The threat of lost commission broke the salesman's resistance. Gary swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed against the tight collar of his mustard shirt. This way, Gary said. The salesman turned and walked toward the office. Deacon followed. His leather dress shoes crunched over the loose gravel scattered across the asphalt. He scanned the perimeter. A high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire secured the rear of the property. A massive, lifted black Ford F-250 sat parked near a corrugated metal garage in the back corner. Deacon recognized the truck. He memorized the license plate through the rain-streaked window of his rented Malibu 2 days ago. The extortion vehicle belonged to the dealership fleet. Gary pulled open a heavy glass door. Refrigerated air blasted Deacon in the face. The sudden drop in temperature chilled the sweat on his skin. The showroom smelled of cheap pine cleaner, stale cigarette smoke, and burnt coffee. Faded promotional posters curled at the edges on faux wood-paneled walls. A single, battered desk occupied the center of the room. "Wait here," Gary said. He pointed to a row of cracked plastic waiting chairs. "I'll go grab him." The salesman hurried down a narrow hallway at the back of the showroom. Deacon ignored the chairs. He paced the worn carpet, mapping the layout of the building. The front room functioned as a hollow facade. The lack of actual sales material, the empty desk, and the quiet atmosphere screamed front operation. Legitimate dirt lot dealerships thrived on chaos and high-pressure tactics. Suncoast Motors felt like a mausoleum. A water cooler gurgled in the corner. Deacon walked past it, moving toward the dark hallway. He needed to verify the scale of the rot. Henderson's dive bar intel painted Vargas as a mid-level predator. The lifted truck and the heavy manila envelope in the high school parking lot confirmed the extortion. But Hector Reyes owed a massive debt. A failed landscaping business required serious capital to sink. Deacon stepped into the hallway. The hum of the central air conditioning masked the sound of his footsteps. The corridor featured 3 closed doors. The first 2 lacked any signage. The third door, situated at the very end of the hall, featured a pane of frosted glass. A black stencil spelled out management. Muffled voices drifted through the cheap drywall. Deacon leaned closer to the frosted glass. The barrier distorted the interior, but it failed to block the harsh fluorescent light burning inside the room. A silhouette shifted behind the glass. Deacon pressed his ear against the wooden frame. "Spread on the Tampa game covers the loss," a rough, gravelly voice said. "I don't care about the Tampa spread," a second, sharper voice replied. The tone carried absolute, frigid authority. "The books need balancing by Friday. The offshore accounts look light." Deacon backed away a fraction of an inch. He recognized the gravelly voice. It belonged to the massive man in the rainstorm. The collection agent. Deacon crouched, ignoring the sharp protest in his bad ankle. The frosted glass ended an inch above the metal door threshold, leaving a narrow, clear gap near the floor. He angled his vision, peering through the crack. The visual evidence laid the entire operation bare. A thick stack of banded $100 bills rested on a metal folding table. A man sat in a rolling office chair, his back to the door. Thick ropes of muscle strained against a tight black t-shirt. A dark, jagged tattoo crawled up the left side of his thick neck, disappearing behind his earlobe. The goon from the parking lot. The neck tattoo muscle dragged a blue plastic bin from under the table. The bin brimmed with more banded cash, paper betting slips, and thick manila envelopes. The car lot sold 0 vehicles. Vargas ran a sprawling, high-volume sports book and a loan-sharking empire from the back office. The rusted sedans out front provided the perfect cover for the constant stream of desperate people walking through the doors carrying heavy envelopes. Bobby Reyes represented a massive payday. If the kid tanked his draft stock and fell into the independent leagues, Vargas owned a piece of his entire career. The mobster intended to funnel the kid's paychecks straight into that blue plastic bin. Deacon committed the layout to memory. The metal table, the blue bin, the filing cabinets in the corner. He needed to find the predatory sports management contract Vargas forced the kid to sign. He needed the physical paper to break the leverage. He placed his hand flat against the wood, preparing to push himself up from the floor. The doorknob turned. The brass cylinder clicked with a sharp, metallic snap. Deacon froze. He threw his weight backward, scrambling to gain his footing on the worn carpet. A heavy hand clamped down on his tailored shoulder. Deacon twisted his neck. Gary, the sweaty salesman, stood right behind him. The man's nervous energy vanished, replaced by a cold, flat stare. He gripped Deacon's charcoal suit jacket with surprising strength. "The showroom is out front, pal," Gary rasped. Chapter 7. A spinning rubber wheel launched a dimpled yellow baseball into the heavy netting. Aluminum cracked against polyurethane. The impact echoed through the cavernous, tin-roofed warehouse like a gunshot. Bobby Reyes unleashed another violent uppercut. The kinetic chain started in his cleats, twisted through his hips, and exploded through his wrists. He swung with pure, unfiltered rage. The barrel of the bat connected with a second incoming ball, driving it straight into the canvas backdrop. Deacon stood in the shadows near the entrance of Cage 4. The industrial complex sat in a desolate industrial park on the edge of the city limits. Midnight stripped the outside world of traffic, leaving only the relentless electric hum of the iron mic pitching machine. A single row of halogen bulbs illuminated the synthetic green turf. He watched the kid destroy the equipment. Bobby operated on total exhaustion. Sweat soaked through his gray cotton t-shirt, pasting the fabric to his spine. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. The flawless, terrifying mechanics from the Terry Park showcase vanished. He dragged his back foot. He pulled his head off the ball. He swung at pitches 3 feet out of the strike zone. He swung to punish himself. Deacon stepped onto the artificial turf. The plastic grass crunched beneath his leather boots. He walked the length of the cage, staying outside the mesh netting. He reached the rear of the tunnel. A metal hopper fed the yellow balls down a wire chute into the spinning rubber tires. He grabbed the heavy red breaker switch on the side of the machine. He pulled it downward. The electric hum died. The spinning tires whined, decelerating into silence. Bobby froze in the batter's box. The kid kept his grip on the aluminum handle. His knuckles looked white under the halogen glare. He stared at the dead machine for a long heartbeat before turning his head. "Turn it back on," Bobby demanded. His voice cracked, rough and dehydrated. "You practice bad habits," Deacon said. He leaned his shoulder against the chain-link frame of the cage. "You drop your back shoulder. Your weight sits on your heels. Keep swinging like that. You build muscle memory for a 200 batting average. I bought an hour of cage time. Turn the power on." The owner locked the front doors 20 minutes ago. He let me in because my corporate expense card covered your tab for the rest of the week. Deacon crossed his arms. "You look like a guy trying to break his own wrists." Bobby lowered the bat. The aluminum barrel rested against the turf. He recognized the charcoal suit and the scarred jawline. He remembered the scout from the bleachers. "Chicago doesn't own me," Bobby said. "Chicago owns a draft pick," Deacon corrected. "Fletcher wants me to cross your name off the whiteboard. He hates the Terry Park strikeout. He hates the biomechanical breakdown. He thinks you lost your vision." "I guessed wrong on a fastball." "You guessed survival," Deacon said. He uncrossed his arms and stepped closer to the netting. "I parked a rented Malibu in the high school lot yesterday. The rain washed out the practice, but it provided a great backdrop for a transaction." Bobby stiffened. The defiance drained from his posture, replaced by a rigid, terrified tension. "I brought a camera with a telephoto lens," Deacon continued. He kept his voice low, projecting the words through the mesh. "I captured a massive black Ford F-250 blocking your rusted Honda. I caught the neck tattoo on the driver. I documented the thick manila envelope changing hands." "Shut up," Bobby hissed. He shot a frantic glance toward the front office of the warehouse. The space remained empty. You dropped your hands at the plate because the guy in the truck told you to drop them, Deacon said. Vargas sent the muscle. Vargas holds the leash. Hector ran up a massive debt on the landscaping business, and your swing became the collateral. Bobby dropped the bat. The metal clanged against the concrete floor beneath the thin layer of turf. He grabbed the mesh netting with both hands, pressing his face against the nylon squares. You have no idea what you stepped into, Scout, Bobby said. The tough exterior shattered, leaving a frightened 18-year-old kid in its place. You take those pictures to the police. You sign my brother's death certificate. The cops ask questions. Vargas makes an example out of Hector. They break legs for a missed payment. They bury people for police involvement. I lack a badge. I work for $1 billion baseball franchise. Deacon met the kid's gaze through the net. I want to break the leverage. I want to buy the debt. Bobby let out a harsh, bitter laugh. You can't buy this debt. It isn't a mortgage. It isn't a car loan. Everything carries a price tag. Not this. Bobby released the netting and paced in a tight circle inside the cage. Hector borrowed 50 grand. He missed 3 months of interest. Vargas called him into the back office at Suncoast Motors. The mobster offered a solution. He offered a contract. Deacon recognized the setup. Henderson outlined the trap at the Mangrove Lounge. A sports management contract. He declared himself your agent. He owns my signature, Bobby said. He stopped pacing and stared at the hopper of yellow baseballs. He owns 90% of my professional baseball income for the next 10 years. He forces me to sign the checks over. Major League Baseball voids those agreements, Deacon said. The commissioner's office runs background checks on every registered agent. They scrutinize the financial handlers of first-round draft picks. Vargas registers as a convicted felon. The league invalidates the paper, and the federal government hits him with extortion charges. Vargas knows the rules, Bobby countered. He understands the MLB background checks. He hates the scrutiny. Deacon frowned. The math stopped making sense. If he hates the scrutiny, a first-round signing bonus puts a massive spotlight on his operation. The league investigates the money. He doesn't want the first-round bonus, Bobby said. The truth hung in the humid air of the warehouse. He wants the shadows. He forces me to tank. He ordered the strikeout at Terry Park. He needs me to fall off the draft board completely. The sheer cruelty of the scheme clicked into place. Deacon felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The independent leagues, Deacon murmured. He runs a pipeline to Mexico and the Dominican Republic, Bobby confirmed. Tears welled in his eyes, tracking through the dust on his cheeks. No MLB oversight. No background checks. Just desperate guys playing for cash in untelevised winter leagues. Vargas funnels me down there. I play year-round. He takes 90 cents of every dollar I earn. I pay Hector's debt until my knees give out, and Vargas keeps his name out of the American papers. The trap had a terrifying perfection. Vargas eliminated the risk of federal intervention by forcing the asset into the black market of international baseball. Bobby traded $1 million future for a lifetime of indentured servitude on dirt in fields south of the border. I strike out again tomorrow, Bobby said. I drop a pop fly in the outfield. I make sure every scout in the Grapefruit League crosses my name off their list. You destroy a generational talent to save a failing landscaping business. I save my brother's life. Bobby grabbed his batting helmet from the turf. He shoved it into his canvas equipment bag. Chicago wants an exit velocity. Vargas wants blood. The math is simple, Scout. I can invalidate the physical contract, Deacon said. I take the paper, the leverage vanishes. You break into a cartel front operation to steal a piece of paper. Bobby zipped the canvas bag shut. He slung the strap over his shoulder. They employ guys who chew up corporate scouts and spit out the bones. You carry a clipboard. They carry steel pipes. I use the tools I possess. You use a platinum credit card. Bobby walked to the flap of the netting and pushed it aside. He stepped out of the cage, standing inches from Deacon. The kid smelled of stale sweat and absolute defeat. The card buys an hour of batting practice. It doesn't buy a miracle. I find the contract, Deacon pressed. Stay away from Suncoast Motors, Bobby warned. You kick the hornet's nest, I get stung. Go back to Chicago. Tell Fletcher my bat speed slowed down. Tell him I lost the hunger. Bobby turned his back on Deacon. He walked toward the exit of the warehouse, his cleats clicking a steady, hollow rhythm against the concrete floor. I never filed the report, Deacon called out to the retreating figure. Bobby pushed the heavy glass exit door open. Then you better start typing. Chapter 8. Accounting flagged your platinum card at 5 yesterday afternoon, Fletcher said. The voice barked through the phone speaker, vibrating the cheap plastic casing against Deacon's ear. 6 o'clock in the morning. Gray, bruised light filtered through the gaps in the motel blinds. The air conditioning unit hummed a steady, rattling drone against the cinder block wall. Deacon sat on the edge of the sagging mattress. He kept his eyes shut. Good morning to you too, Fletch, Deacon said. His voice carried the rough texture of crushed gravel. You missed the Tampa showcase, Fletcher snapped. We had 3 high school arms throwing in the low 90s. You skipped the evaluation. Instead, the GPS in your rental car pinged at a dirt lot dealership on Route 41. You tried to authorize the purchase of 6 commercial cargo vans. Our minor league affiliates need transportation, Deacon said. He rubbed his face with his free hand. Stubble scratched his palm. I took some initiative. You evaluate bat speed, Deacon. You don't manage fleet logistics. Papers rustled over the cellular connection. Fletcher sat in a climate-controlled high-rise in Chicago, thousands of miles away from the Florida humidity. I pulled your preliminary report on Bobby Reyes. You left the exit velocity fields blank. You wrote 1 sentence in the summary section. The kid dropped his hands on purpose, Deacon said. I don't care about his hands, Fletcher shouted. The sheer volume forced Deacon to pull the phone an inch away from his ear. I care about the numbers. The analytics department needs data. We run algorithms, not a charity. You waste company time playing detective. Someone put a squeeze on the kid, Deacon countered. He opened his eyes. The room looked like a beige prison cell. A local loan shark holds a predatory management contract on him. The guy forces Reyes to tank his draft stock. If Chicago drafts the kid in the first round, the league investigates the agent. The loan shark wants Reyes in the independent leagues. Fascinating story, Fletcher said. The anger vanished from the executive's voice, replaced by a cold, absolute corporate detachment. Sell it to a screenwriter. It has 0 bearing on our operation. Deacon gripped the edge of the mattress. It ruins a $1 million asset. The asset is compromised, Fletcher corrected. We draft clean profiles. We buy raw talent, and we develop it in our system. We avoid local extortion rings. Cross Reyes off the whiteboard. Forget the name. Give me a few days, Deacon pushed. I can find the contract. I break the leverage. Chicago gets a generational talent for a steal. Check your email, Fletcher said. Deacon looked across the room. The silver laptop sat open on the faux wood desk. The screen glowed, casting a harsh blue rectangle against the peeling floral wallpaper. An unread message icon pulsed in the corner of the display. He stood up. The transition from a seated position to standing required a precise, practiced mechanical sequence. He shifted his weight to his left leg. He locked his left knee. He placed his right boot on the carpet and transferred a fraction of his mass to the fused joint. Ty Cobb's ghost woke up hungry. A jagged spike of pure, unadulterated fire shot from his heel, traveled up his calf, and settled deep in the marrow of his shin. Deacon bit down on a curse. He dragged the right leg across the room. He reached the desk and leaned his hips against the edge, taking the pressure off the ruined bone. He tapped the laptop trackpad with his index finger. The email opened. The Chicago front office logo sat at the top of the digital page. Formal reprimand, unauthorized activities and expense violations. Deacon scanned the sterile, bloodless corporate language. The text documented the missed Tampa showcase. It highlighted the unauthorized attempt to purchase vehicles. It cited a breach of standard scouting protocols. "I read it," Deacon said into the phone. "That goes in your permanent file," Fletcher said. "You operate on thin ice, Deacon. The general manager wants a clean draft board by Monday. You chase this ghost in Fort Myers, you violate a direct mandate. We terminate your contract." Deacon stared at the glowing screen. "You want to fire me over one kid?" "I fire you for insubordination," Fletcher corrected. "And a termination for cause triggers a severance clause. We pull the health insurance immediately." The threat hung in the stale motel air. Fletcher found the pressure point. The executive bypassed the ego and aimed straight for the bone. Chicago provided a premium medical plan. The insurance covered the expensive, specialized, anti-inflammatory medication Deacon needed just to walk from a rental car to a set of bleachers. The policy paid for the occasional cortisone injections. It covered the physical therapy sessions in the off-season. Without the corporate medical shield, the chronic pain became unmanageable. Without the pills, the fused ankle reduced him to a cripple within a month. "You squeeze me," Deacon said. "I protect the franchise," Fletcher said. "We pay you for obedience. We pay for your eyesight. We don't pay for your conscience. You want to save the world, join the Peace Corps. You want to keep your medical benefits, you get in your car and drive to Atlanta." Atlanta. "A high school tournament starts tomorrow afternoon," Fletcher said. "We have 2 shortstops on the radar. Verify their sprint speeds. File the paperwork. Do not miss the flight." Deacon looked down at his right leg. The denim fabric of his jeans hid the thick, ropey scar tissue. He remembered the sound of the metal cleats tearing through his cartilage in Cleveland. He remembered the orthopedic surgeon explaining the fusion procedure. He understood the value of the Chicago insurance policy. It represented mobility. It represented survival. He looked back at the laptop screen. Bobby Reyes had a flawless, fluid swing. The kid had the kind of rotational acceleration scouts searched their entire lives to find. And Vargas intended to trap that talent on dirt in fields in Mexico, stealing 90 cents of every dollar the kid earned, all to cover a failed landscaping business. The corporate machine demanded Deacon abandon the kid. The machine demanded radar numbers and sprint speeds. Deacon rubbed his scarred jawline. He needed the pills. He hated the pain. But he hated the bullies more. He despised the guys who used leverage to crush people who lacked power. Fletcher used the health insurance. Vargas used the brothers' debt. It was the exact same game, just played in different zip codes. "I need to book a flight," Deacon said. "The travel department emailed the itinerary," Fletcher said. The smug satisfaction radiated through the speaker. The executive believed he won the chess match. Your flight leaves Southwest Florida International at 2 this afternoon. Have a safe trip, Deacon. Stay away from the used car lots. Sure thing, Fletch. Deacon pulled the phone away from his ear. He tapped the red icon. The screen went dark, cutting the connection to Chicago. He tossed the cell phone onto the mattress. It bounced once and settled near the pillows. He turned his attention back to the silver laptop. He reached out and grabbed the top of the monitor. He snapped the machine shut. The plastic hinge clicked. The harsh blue light vanished, plunging the corner of the room back into the bruised gray gloom of the Florida dawn. Atlanta had zero appeal. Shortstops with fast sprint speeds meant nothing. Deacon reached for his wallet on the desk. He pulled out the silver corporate expense card. He examined the raised numbers and the Chicago logo. The plastic represented the chain Fletcher used to control him. He shoved the card back into the leather fold and stuffed the wallet into his back pocket. He needed to find a specific piece of paper. He needed the physical sports management contract Bobby Reyes signed. The document represented the entire foundation of Vargas's extortion scheme. If Deacon had the paper, Vargas lost the leverage. Suncoast Motors operated as a fortress during the day. The sweaty salesman ran interference. The neck tattoo muscle guarded the back office. But a used car lot at midnight offered a different environment. Darkness provided cover. Deacon grabbed a heavy steel flashlight from his canvas duffel bag. Chapter 9. Steel scraped against steel. Deacon twisted the flathead screwdriver inside the cheap brass cylinder of the rear service door. He maintained upward pressure on the makeshift tension wrench. The internal metal tumblers clicked in a jagged, uneven rhythm. Midnight stripped the baking heat from the Fort Myers air, leaving behind a thick, suffocating dampness. Water condensed on the corrugated metal siding of the Suncoast Motors garage. The moisture soaked through the shoulders of Deacon's dark polo shirt. A solitary cricket shrieked from a patch of dead weeds near the chain-link fence. Distant tires hummed on the asphalt of Route 41. The final tumbler gave way with a hollow thud. Deacon turned the doorknob. The heavy metal door swung inward. Stagnant, trapped air rushed out to meet him. The dealership turned off the central air conditioning at night to save a few pennies. The interior felt like the inside of a sealed plastic bag. He stepped over the concrete threshold. His rubber-soled boots made zero sound on the scuffed linoleum tiles. He pulled the service door shut, leaving it unlatched by a fraction of an inch to guarantee a rapid exit. Total darkness consumed the back hallway. Deacon retrieved a slim, aluminum penlight from his pocket. He pressed the rubber tail switch. A tight, narrow beam of white light cut through the gloom. The beam painted a circle against the cheap wood paneling of the corridor. Dust motes danced in the illumination. The space smelled of ammonia floor wax, stale cigarette smoke, and burnt coffee. He navigated the hallway, passing the two unmarked doors. He reached the end of the corridor. The frosted glass pane of the third door reflected his penlight. Black stencil letters spelled out management. The door knob rattled in his hand. Locked. Deacon wedged the flathead screwdriver between the wooden frame and the strike plate. He threw his weight against the plastic handle of the tool. The cheap pine frame splintered. The metal latch popped free. The door swung open, banging against a metal filing cabinet on the inside wall. The noise echoed through the empty building. Deacon froze. He killed the penlight. He stood in absolute darkness, holding his breath. The silence stretched out, heavy and absolute. The showroom up front remained empty. The neck tattoo muscle slept in a different zip code. Vargas trusted the deadbolts and the rusted chain-link fence to protect the empire. Deacon clicked the penlight back on. He stepped into the office. The space looked smaller without the glare of the overhead fluorescent bulbs. The metal folding table sat in the center of the room. The blue plastic bin remained absent. Vargas cleared the cash and the betting slips out at the close of business. Deacon limped toward the corner. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a dull throbbing ache through his fused right ankle. The transition from the motel desk to the dealership alley required a physical toll. He ignored the pain. 4 tall metal filing cabinets stood against the drywall. Deacon grabbed the handle of the top drawer on the first cabinet. He pulled it open. Manila folders crammed the metal track. He holstered the penlight between his teeth. He used both hands to rifle through the paper tabs. The labels featured names of desperate people and descriptions of rusted vehicles. Honda Civic, repossession. Chevy Silverado, title hold. Hernandez, final notice. Vargas operated a massive, predatory machine. The dealership paperwork functioned as a smokescreen for the shadow bank. Deacon shoved the drawer shut. He opened the second drawer. More automotive detritus filled the space. He moved to the next cabinet. The label on the front read Contracts, Special. He yanked the drawer open. The metal track shrieked in protest. Deacon swept the penlight beam over the tabs. The names shifted from local landscapers and single mothers to amateur athletes. He recognized 3 kids from the Gulf Coast summer leagues. Vargas ran a sprawling pipeline, funneling vulnerable talent toward the unregulated independent circuits in Mexico. Deacon searched for the letter R. Ramirez. Randolph. Restrepo. The R section ended. Reyes was missing. He cursed through clenched teeth. He pushed the folders back and slammed the drawer shut. The physical sports management contract represented the entire foundation of the extortion scheme. Bobby Reyes needed that paper shredded to regain his freedom. If the folder sat missing from the main filing system, Vargas kept it closer to the vest. Deacon pivoted toward the metal folding table. A battered rolling office chair sat pushed underneath. He directed the beam of light toward the floor. A heavy cast-iron floor safe sat bolted to the concrete foundation beneath the table. The metal box featured a thick dial combination lock and a solid steel handle. Deacon crouched down, ignoring the sharp protest in his right leg. He wiped a layer of dust from the black iron door. The safe projected absolute, unforgiving security. It required a professional safecracker or a shaped explosive charge to breach. Deacon had a flathead screwdriver and a bad attitude. The physical contract rested inside that iron box. The leverage remained locked away. Deacon pushed himself up from the floor. He needed a secondary angle. The front office in Chicago severed his corporate shield the moment they sent the formal reprimand. He operated outside the lines now, a rogue element chasing a ghost. He aimed the penlight at the top of the metal folding table. A messy stack of sports pages, torn from the local newspaper, covered the surface. Red ink circled point spreads and betting lines. A ceramic ashtray brimmed with crushed cigar stubs. Deacon moved the light toward the back corner of the table. A shallow metal drawer sat built into the underside of the folding structure. He pulled the metal lip. The drawer slid open on greased ball bearings. A cheap, prepaid cellular phone rested on a stack of blank receipt paper. The plastic casing looked battered. Smudges coated the glass screen. Deacon picked up the device. He pressed the power button on the side. The screen illuminated, casting a harsh blue glow across his face. A simple numeric keypad appeared, demanding a 4-digit passcode. Vargas ran a sprawling illegal sports book and an extortion ring. A man coordinating international baseball pipelines and local loan sharking required constant communication. The burner phone represented the digital nerve center of the operation. The text messages and call logs inside that plastic shell held the names of the enforcers, the coordinates of the offshore accounts, and the full scope of the leverage applied to the Reyes family. Deacon slipped the burner phone into his front pocket. The plastic felt heavy against his thigh. He secured a piece of the puzzle. The digital evidence offered a different kind of crowbar. He pushed the shallow drawer shut. The ambient noise of the building shifted. A faint, metallic clatter echoed from the front showroom. Deacon froze. He killed the pen light. The blue glow vanished, plunging the office back into absolute darkness. He held his breath. The silence stretched out, taut and heavy. A floorboard creaked in the corridor outside the management office. Someone walked down the hallway, moving with deliberate, heavy steps. Vargas employed men who worked the graveyard shift. The extortion business required constant vigilance. Deacon reached for his back pocket. He gripped the heavy handle of the steel flashlight he brought from the canvas duffel bag. The tool functioned as a bludgeon in a desperate situation. He backed away from the metal table. His rubber soles glided over the linoleum. He reached the shattered wooden doorframe of the office. A beam of yellow light swept across the frosted glass of the closed doors down the hall. The approaching guard carried a heavy industrial flashlight. Deacon slipped through the ruined doorway. He stepped into the rear corridor. He turned away from the approaching light and moved toward the service exit. He forced a rapid, uneven stride, ignoring the fire in his right ankle. He reached the heavy metal door. The latch remained cracked open. He pushed the steel barrier. The humid Florida night air hit his face. He stepped over the concrete threshold and into the alley behind the garage. He grabbed the exterior handle. He pulled the door shut, easing the metal into the frame to avoid a loud slam. The latch clicked into place. Deacon turned toward the gravel parking area. He needed to reach the rented Malibu, parked 2 blocks away. He needed to plug the burner phone into his laptop and crack the 4-digit code. A shadow detached from the corrugated metal wall of the garage. Heavy work boots crunched against the loose gravel. Chapter 10. Heavy work boots crunched against the loose gravel. 2 shapes detached from the corrugated metal siding of the Suncoast Motors garage. They stepped into the meager, ambient glow of a distant street lamp. Deacon kept his right hand wrapped around the heavy steel flashlight in his pocket. His left hand hovered near his thigh. He stood 10 feet away from the rear bumper of his rented Malibu. The burner phone felt like a brick in his front pocket. The men wore grease-stained coveralls. The fabric absorbed the darkness. Thick forearms bulged under rolled-up sleeves. The man on the right slapped a galvanized steel pipe against his open palm. The metal produced a dull, hollow thud against calloused skin. "You got lost, old man," the pipe carrier said. His voice carried a thick, guttural edge. "I prefer midnight strolls," Deacon said. He kept his tone flat, measuring the distance to the car door. "The humidity clears the sinuses. Mr. Vargas hates trespassers." The second man shifted his weight. He held a matching length of steel plumbing pipe. He had a flattened nose and a thick, jagged scar cutting through his left eyebrow. "He told us to break the legs first. Then we check your pockets." "I possess a terrible limp," Deacon said. He locked his left knee, preparing the bad right ankle to bear his weight. "You break the legs, I walk with the exact same stride tomorrow. We make sure you don't walk at all." The pipe carrier lunged. Deacon abandoned the negotiation. He drew the heavy steel flashlight from his back pocket and threw it like a fast pitch right at the man's face. The heavy metal cylinder sailed through the humid air. The pipe carrier flinched, raising a thick forearm to block the projectile. The flashlight connected with bone, producing a sharp crack. The man grunted and stumbled a half-step backward. The distraction bought Deacon a fraction of a second. He could not outrun them. Ty Cobb's ghost guaranteed a failed sprint. He needed a better weapon. He needed the trunk. He dug his plastic key fob from his front pocket with his left hand. His thumb found the trunk release button. He jammed the pad. The mechanical latch clicked. The trunk lid popped open an inch. Scarface charged. The man swung the steel pipe in a brutal, horizontal arc aimed at Deacon's ribcage. Deacon threw his upper body backward, diving away from the weapon. The galvanized steel sliced through the heavy Florida air a fraction of an inch from his chest. The momentum carried the mechanic past Deacon. The pipe smashed into the taillight of the rented Malibu. Red plastic exploded. Shards rained down onto the asphalt like bloody hail. Deacon scrambled toward the rear bumper. He grabbed the edge of the trunk lid and shoved it upward. The dim cargo light illuminated the gray carpeted interior. Scarface recovered his balance. He raised the pipe over his head, preparing for a vertical skull-crushing strike. Deacon plunged his hands into the spare tire well. He bypassed the flimsy jack. His fingers closed around the thick, cold steel of the cross-shaped torque wrench. The metal felt dense and unforgiving. He spun around just as the steel pipe came down. Deacon raised the heavy lug wrench in a desperate, two-handed block. Metal clashed against metal. The impact sent a violent shockwave down Deacon's forearms. Sparks showered the dark pavement. The sheer force of the blow drove Deacon to his right knee. Pain exploded in his fused ankle. The joint screamed in protest. "Hold him down," the first mechanic yelled, recovering from the flashlight throw. He closed the distance, raising his own pipe. Deacon refused to stay pinned. He rolled his shoulders and shoved the torque wrench upward, breaking the weapon lock. He drove the steel cross forward like a battering ram, aiming for Scarface's midsection. The blunt end of the wrench sank deep into the man's gut. The mechanic expelled all the air in his lungs with a wet, ragged gasp. He folded forward, dropping his steel pipe onto the gravel. Deacon tried to stand. The first mechanic swung his pipe like a baseball bat. Deacon twisted his torso, but the confined space between the car and the attacker offered zero escape route. The galvanized steel caught Deacon flush on the left shoulder. A blinding flash of white light erupted behind Deacon's eyes. The collarbone felt like shattered porcelain. His left arm went completely numb, dropping uselessly to his side. The impact knocked him back against the open trunk of the Malibu. He bounced off the metal frame and slumped against the bumper. The mechanic stepped forward, smelling of stale sweat and motor oil. He raised the pipe for the finishing blow. Deacon gripped the torque wrench with his functioning right hand. Survival stripped away the civilized corporate scout, leaving only the desperate animal underneath. He did not aim for a disarm. He aimed for structural destruction. Deacon swung the heavy steel cross from his hip, putting all his remaining rotational force into the strike. The torque wrench connected with the mechanic's ribcage, just below the armpit. The sound of shattering bone echoed through the empty industrial park. It resembled dry branches snapping under a heavy boot. The mechanic let out a high, reedy scream. The pipe slipped from his fingers, clattering against the asphalt. He clutched his ruined side, his knees buckling under the sudden catastrophic trauma. He collapsed onto the loose gravel, writhing and gasping for air. Scarface remained on his hands and knees, fighting to pull oxygen back into his lungs. He stared at his writhing partner, the fight draining from his eyes. Deacon did not wait for a second wind. He dropped the bloody torque wrench into the trunk and slammed the lid shut. He grabbed the driver's side door handle with his right hand. He yanked the metal open. He threw his body into the cabin, dragging his bad leg across the plastic threshold. He jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, shaking the cheap dashboard. Deacon shifted the transmission into drive with his right hand. His left arm hung dead against his ribcage. Fire burned deep inside the shoulder joint. He stomped on the accelerator. The tires shrieked against the pavement, kicking up a rooster tail of loose gravel and broken red plastic. The Malibu surged forward, leaving the dark alleyway behind. Deacon steered with one hand. He navigated the quiet commercial streets, ignoring the stop signs. He kept the headlights off for 3 blocks, letting the darkness hide the vehicle. He watched the rearview mirror. The road remained empty. Vargas's mechanics stayed behind in the dirt. He flicked the headlights on. The yellow beams cut through the muggy Florida night. Sweat poured down Deacon's face, stinging his eyes. His breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. Every bump in the asphalt sent a fresh wave of torture through his left shoulder. He patted his right front pocket. The hard plastic rectangle of the stolen burner phone pressed against his thigh. Vargas guarded the phone with leg breakers. The mobster kept the digital secrets close. Deacon merged onto Route 41, heading north. He needed ice. He needed a secure room. He had a puzzle box, and he intended to pry it open before the sun came up. Chapter 11. Ice cracked inside the thin plastic bag. Freezing water dripped down Deacon's chest, soaking the waistband of his jeans. He sat on the edge of the sagging motel mattress, pressing the improvised cold pack against his left shoulder. A deep, ugly matrix of purple and black bruising covered the skin over his collarbone. The galvanized steel pipe from the alleyway left a permanent impression. Every breath sent a jagged spike of agony through his chest cavity. He leaned his weight against the faux wood headboard. The wall-mounted air conditioner rattled beneath the window, blowing a meager, lukewarm breeze across the room. He ignored the ambient noise. He kept his attention locked on the silver laptop resting on the bedspread next to his thigh. A black USB cable connected the computer to the battered burner phone. Deacon used his functioning right hand to tap the trackpad. The laptop screen cast a harsh blue glare across the dim room. A dialog box popped up on the monitor, demanding a 4-digit PIN to access the external device. Vargas guarded his secrets with a cheap digital lock. Deacon lacked specialized hacking software. He lacked a badge and a cybercrimes unit. He had 20 years of reading human behavior, and criminals rarely demonstrated original thought. Deacon picked up the burner phone. He tilted the plastic casing toward the yellow light of the bedside lamp. He held the blank screen at a sharp angle, letting the glare illuminate the glass surface. A thick layer of grease and finger smudges coated the display. The heaviest concentrations formed tiny, distinct circles over 4 specific numbers on the digital keypad matrix. 1, 9, 8, 4. Vargas fancied himself a dystopian dictator. Or he just liked the book. Deacon dropped the phone back onto the mattress. He placed his right index finger on the laptop keyboard. He punched the 4 numbers into the prompt. He hit the Enter key. The progress bar flashed green. The security prompt vanished. A master folder populated on the laptop screen. Deacon clicked the icon. Hundreds of text message transcripts, call logs, and compressed image files flooded the display. The digital nerve center of Suncoast Motors lay open and exposed. Deacon shifted the ice pack. He grimaced as the cold bit into the swollen muscle tissue. He scrolled through the first batch of text messages. The initial hits confirmed Henderson's dive bar gossip. Hector missed the payment. Add 5% to the principal. Tell the kid to drop his hands on the curveball tomorrow. The message carried a timestamp from Tuesday afternoon. Vargas orchestrated the strikeout at Terry Park from the comfort of his back office. The mobster used the brothers' landscaping debt as a choke collar. He controlled a $1 million swing with a $50,000 marker. Deacon kept scrolling. The extortion ring represented a steady stream of dirty pennies. It funded the lifted trucks and the shiny watches. But the sheer volume of the text messages hinted at a much larger enterprise. He opened a folder labeled Logistics. The language in the transcripts shifted. The street slang vanished, replaced by precise inventory-style shorthand. The texts originated from a blocked international number. Need 6 white blocks for Freeport. 30-inch shafts. Got 4 tonight off a center console in Captiva. 2 more lined up in Naples. Send the barge. Deacon frowned. He moved his right hand away from the keyboard and rubbed his scarred jawline. White blocks and 30-inch shafts made 0 sense in the context of sports betting or loan sharking. He opened a corresponding image file attached to the thread. The high-resolution photograph showed a dark, windowless warehouse. A massive wooden shipping crate sat in the center of the concrete floor. The side of the crate featured a stenciled Yamaha Marine logo. Inside the timber frame, a brand-new 300-horsepower outboard boat motor gleamed under harsh halogen lights. The engine casing shone a pristine factory white. The puzzle pieces snapped together. Deacon closed the image and opened a new search tab on his web browser. He typed a query for the retail price of a Yamaha 300 outboard motor. The results loaded instantly. A single engine carried a price tag of $30,000. Vargas ran a massive marine theft ring. The extortion and the sports betting functioned as a smokescreen. The real money floated on the water. Florida harbored thousands of wealthy retirees and rich tourists. They parked million-dollar center console fishing boats on unguarded backyard canal docks. Vargas sent crews into the mangroves under the cover of darkness. The mechanics from the dealership stripped the massive engines off the transoms, loaded them onto flat-deck barges, and vanished into the labyrinth of the Gulf Coast waterways. A shipping container full of stolen outboards represented $500,000 in untraceable cash in the Caribbean. Deacon returned to the text message transcripts. The scale of the operation staggered him. Vargas organized 2 or 3 strikes a week. He targeted high-end marinas in Naples, Marco Island, and Sanibel. Bobby Reyes and the landscaping debt meant nothing to the overall balance sheet. Vargas crushed the kid out of pure, sociopathic boredom and a desire for total control. The mobster squashed a generational baseball talent just because he held the power to do it. Deacon clicked the most recent text thread. The message arrived on the burner phone just an hour before the break-in. The Freeport container ships out tomorrow. Meet at the dog track. 0200 hours. Bring the heavy lifters. We have 12 blocks to load. 12 engines. $360,000 in stolen merchandise. Deacon opened a digital map of Lee County. He dragged the cursor south, scanning the coastline below Fort Myers. He bypassed the tourist beaches and the state parks. He searched for the specific landmark mentioned in the text. He found it nestled near the border of Collier County. The Bonita Springs Greyhound track sat abandoned just off the Tamiami Trail. The state outlawed dog racing years ago. The massive grandstands and the sprawling parking lots sat empty, rotting under the Florida sun. The map revealed a crucial geographical detail. The rear of the property bordered a deep, navigable inlet of the Imperial River. The water provided direct access to the Gulf of Mexico. Vargas used the dead dog track as a staging ground. The mobster kept the heavy transport barges hidden in the mangrove cuts behind the property. Deacon checked the clock on the laptop screen. Midnight. The drop happened in 26 hours. Chicago wanted an exit velocity. They wanted a clean scouting report. Fletcher cared zero about stolen boat motors or local crime syndicates. The front office demanded absolute obedience. Deacon stared at the glowing blue text on the screen. The machine expected him to ignore the rot. It expected him to rubber stamp the kid's failure and move to the next high school tournament in Atlanta. He closed the text log folder. He dragged the entire directory to a secure, encrypted partition on his hard drive. He pulled the USB cable from the burner phone. The physical leverage now existed in two places. Vargas held the sports management contract. The mobster held the paper that destroyed Bobby Reyes. Deacon held the proof of a multi-million-dollar federal grand theft operation. The Coast Guard and the FBI offered heavy bounties for that kind of logistical intelligence. He had the weapon required for a massive squeeze play. He just needed the visual confirmation to lock the trap. He needed high-resolution photographs of Vargas standing next to the stolen engines. A land-based approach to the dog track offered zero cover. The property featured acres of flat, open asphalt. Vargas employed men who carried steel pipes and bad attitudes. They established a perimeter. They watched the highway. The water offered the only blind spot. The Imperial River snaked through dense, impenetrable mangrove forests. The dark canopy provided absolute concealment. Deacon tossed the bag of melting ice into the small plastic trash can beside the desk. He winced as a fresh wave of fire shot through his collarbone. He ignored the pain. Ty Cobb's ghost had to share the misery tonight. He reached across the bed and grabbed his own cell phone. He scrolled through his limited contact list. He stopped on a local number. The eco-charter skiff carried a shallow draft. It navigated the backwater cuts without making a sound. The captain hated the local corruption as much as he did, and she knew the river better than the cartel. Deacon hit the call button. The line rang twice. "I need a boat ride," Deacon said into the receiver. "And I need it in the dark." Chapter 12. The two-stroke Yamaha outboard motor purred a low, steady rhythm. Black water split beneath the shallow fiberglass hull of the eco-charter skiff. Starlight offered the only illumination. Gwen navigated the narrow channel of the Imperial River by memory and instinct. She kept the running lights off. The dark canopy of the mangrove forest swallowed the boat, hiding it from the civilized world. Deacon sat on a cracked vinyl cooler in the bow. He wore a pair of dark polarized sunglasses despite the midnight hour. The lenses shielded his swollen purple left eye from stray branches and the harsh glare of the starlight reflecting off the water. The galvanized pipe strike from the alleyway left his left shoulder a throbbing, useless knot of bruised muscle. He rested his left arm in his lap, letting his right hand grip the heavy nylon strap of his canvas duffel bag. "You look like a piece of raw meat," Gwen said. She stood behind the center console, one hand resting on the steering wheel. "I met some local mechanics," Deacon said. He kept his voice low. The sound carried across the flat water. "They specialize in blunt force trauma. We disagreed on a labor dispute. Thomas warned you about kicking the hornet's nest. Vargas runs the Hornets. Thomas just sells the juice." Deacon adjusted his grip on the duffel bag. "We passed the county line 10 minutes ago. How close are we?" "The river narrows up ahead," Gwen said. She pulled back on the throttle. The Yamaha engine quieted to a muffled hum. The old dog track sits on a limestone ridge just beyond the next bend. The water runs deep right up to the property line. It provides a perfect loading dock for heavy draft vessels. The air grew stagnant and heavy. The breeze off the Gulf of Mexico died, blocked by the dense walls of twisted mangrove roots. Crickets and cicadas hummed a chaotic, vibrating drone from the muddy banks. The heat wrapped around them, thick and unyielding. Deacon unzipped the canvas duffel bag with his right hand. He reached inside and pulled out the Nikon DSLR camera. He brought the heavy telephoto lens with him. He twisted the long cylinder onto the camera body. The metal mounts clicked, locking the glass into place. He checked the digital settings, bumping the ISO high enough to capture images in the dark without a flash. A flash equaled a death sentence in the swamp. Gwen killed the outboard motor. Absolute silence crashed down on the skiff. The boat glided forward on its remaining momentum. Gwen grabbed an 8-foot fiberglass push-pole from a set of deck clips. She stepped onto the raised stern platform. She drove the blunt end of the pole into the soft river bottom, propelling the skiff forward with smooth, silent strokes. The Imperial River snaked to the left. The tangled wall of mangroves broke, revealing a sprawling expanse of decaying concrete and rusted metal. The Bonita Springs Greyhound track loomed out of the Florida night like a prehistoric skeleton. The massive grandstands sat empty and rotting under the stars. Weeds punched through the cracked asphalt of the spectator concourse. Nature reclaimed the gambling mecca, wrapping vines around the rusted steel support beams of the roof. The front of the property faced the Tamiami Trail, miles away across an ocean of flat parking lots. Vargas's muscle guarded that asphalt desert. They watched the highway. They ignored the dark water at their backs. Gwen drove the push-pole into the mud and held the skiff steady. They sat 30 yards from the edge of the property, hidden by a thick cluster of low-hanging branches. Harsh, artificial light bled from the staging area. Vargas set up shop on a wide concrete apron bordering the river. 4 portable halogen work lamps sat on tall metal tripods, casting a blinding white glare over the operation. The lights illuminated a massive flat-deck steel barge tied to a set of rusted iron cleats on the seawall. The barge sat low in the water, waiting for cargo. A rusted diesel forklift idled on the concrete. Exhaust fumes drifted over the water, smelling of burnt oil. Deacon raised the Nikon. He rested the heavy barrel of the telephoto lens against the fiberglass gunnel of the skiff to steady his aim. He pressed his good eye against the rubber eye cup. The glass elements brought the criminal enterprise into sharp, terrifying focus. 6 men worked on the concrete apron. They wore dark t-shirts and heavy work boots. They moved with practiced, efficient speed. The forklift operator drove the machine toward a line of massive wooden shipping crates. The side of each timber frame featured a stenciled Yamaha Marine logo. 12 crates sat on the concrete. Deacon did the math. $360,000 in stolen merchandise. The scale of the operation dwarfed the petty extortion of the local landscaper. Bobby Reyes represented a rounding error on this balance sheet. The forklift operator slid the steel tines under a crate. The diesel engine roared. The machine lifted the heavy wooden box, reversed, and drove toward the edge of the seawall. 2 men stood on the deck of the rusted barge. They guided the forklift, signaling with their hands, bringing the crate down onto the steel deck. Deacon clicked the shutter. The mechanical snap sounded deafening in his own ears, but the roar of the diesel forklift masked the noise from the shore. He fired a rapid burst of frames. He documented the crates, the forklift, and the faces of the loading crew. He needed the undisputed leader. He needed the man holding the leash. He scanned the perimeter of the halogen glare. A lifted black Ford F-250 sat parked in the shadows near the edge of the grandstands. Deacon recognized the truck. He photographed the same vehicle in the rainstorm at the high school parking lot. A man leaned against the front quarter panel of the truck. Deacon adjusted the focus ring. The man came into view. He wore a crisp white Guayabera shirt and dark slacks. He smoked a thick cigar, the cherry glowing red in the dark. He watched the loading process with the detached boredom of a warehouse manager doing inventory. Vargas. Deacon framed the shot. He waited for the mobster to turn his head toward the halogen lights. The man took a drag from the cigar and exhaled a thick cloud of white smoke. He turned, shouting an order at the forklift operator. The harsh white light illuminated his face. Deacon held the shutter button down. The camera recorded 10 high-resolution images in 3 seconds. He captured Vargas, the stolen Yamaha crates, and the transport barge all in the same frame. The digital trap snapped shut. Deacon lowered the camera. He checked the LCD screen on the back of the device. The clarity held up. The evidence existed in a tangible format. The front office in Chicago demanded data to justify their decisions. The FBI demanded proof. Deacon had the ammunition to blow the entire operation out of the water. They finished loading in 20 minutes, Gwen whispered. She kept her weight leaning against the fiberglass push-pole. That barge catches the outgoing tide. It hits international waters in the Gulf before the sun comes up. Let the barge go, Deacon said. He zipped the camera back into the canvas duffel bag. I don't care about the boat motors. I care about the leverage. You want to blackmail a man moving $500,000 in stolen goods. I want to trade the photos for a piece of paper, Deacon corrected. He slung the bag over his good shoulder. He shreds the sports management contract. He releases Bobby Reyes, and I forget I own a camera. He kills you and keeps the kid. He calculates the risk. A dead scout brings the state police. The photos bring the feds. He gives up a single baseball player to save a massive smuggling ring. The forklift dropped another wooden crate onto the deck of the barge. The steel hull groaned under the added weight. The diesel engine revved, blowing a fresh cloud of black exhaust into the humid air. Deacon looked at the dying grandstands. The machine chewed up desperate people on every corner of this state. Vargas used the old dog track to feed his empire, just like he used the high school baseball diamond. We have the proof, Deacon said. He turned to face the stern. Turn the boat around. Chapter 13. Glossy 8x10 photographs slapped against the scarred mahogany of the corner booth. Deacon tossed the stack of images onto the sticky surface. He slid onto the cracked vinyl bench, favoring his left shoulder. The pipe strike from the alleyway reduced his deltoid muscle to a knot of pure fire. He kept his right hand tucked in his lap, letting his left hand push the pictures across the table. Henderson stopped rattling the ice in his highball glass. The retired umpire leaned forward, squinting against the dim, flickering light of the fake Tiffany lamp overhead. He picked up the top photograph. You found a hobby, Henderson said. I found a crowbar, Deacon corrected. Henderson thumbed through the stack. The high-resolution prints documented the entire Bonita Springs operation. The halogen lights exposed the rusted barge. The telephoto lens captured the forklift, the 12 wooden crates, and the stenciled Yamaha Marine logos. The final photo in the sequence featured Vargas exhaling cigar smoke, his face illuminated perfectly against the Florida night. 12 blocks, Henderson murmured. He set the pictures back on the table. $300,000 in a single shipment. You stepped in something deep, Diak. Vargas runs a massive shadow port. He uses the dead dog track for the heavy lifting. The Coast Guard hunts these guys every night. Henderson traced the edge of the top photo with a thick finger. The cartels steal the engines in Naples and Marco Island. They load them onto flat-deck barges. Fast boats meet the barges in international waters and run the cargo down to the Bahamas. It funds half the black market in the Caribbean. A waitress materialized from the gloom. She wore a faded denim skirt and a tired expression. Deacon ordered a double Maker's Mark, neat. She nodded and vanished back toward the bar. The boat motors represent a federal indictment, Deacon said. Grand theft. Interstate smuggling. The FBI loves a clean paper trail. The photos put Vargas right in the center of the frame. You mail these to the Miami field office, They lock him up for 20 years, Henderson said. The feds take months to build a case, Deacon said. He shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable angle for his bad ankle. They form a task force. They run wiretaps. Bobby Reyes gets drafted next week. Vargas cashes the kid's ticket while the FBI fills out paperwork. So you skip the feds. I use them as the hammer, Deacon said. I take these photos to Vargas. Henderson let out a sharp, barking laugh. The sound cut through the low hum of the jukebox in the corner. You want to blackmail a cartel boss. I want to execute a squeeze play. You have a death wish. Henderson grabbed his glass and took a long swallow. The man employs mechanics who swing steel pipes at your head. He runs an international smuggling ring. You walk up to him with a stack of photos. He shoots you in the face and throws you in the swamp. He runs a business, Deacon countered. He calculates the risk. I hold $1 million piece of evidence. I offer him a trade. He shreds the sports management contract, holding Bobby Reyes hostage, and I hand over the digital memory card. I walk away. He keeps his smuggling route. The waitress returned. She set the heavy glass of bourbon in front of Deacon and walked away without asking for payment. She knew the tab went on the Chicago expense card. Deacon picked up the drink with his good hand. He took a sip. The alcohol burned a hot welcome trail down his throat, dulling the sharp edges of the pain in his shoulder. Vargas does the math, Deacon continued. A dead corporate scout brings the local cops. The photos bring the federal government. He gives up a single high school baseball player to save a $500,000 maritime operation. The leverage favors the kid. Henderson stared at the photographs. The ambient noise of the mangrove lounge swelled around them. Glasses clinked. A pool break echoed from the back room. You put a lot of faith in criminal logic, Diak. I put faith in greed, Deacon said. Vargas wants the money. The boat motors represent a massive, untraceable revenue stream. The kid represents a risky, high-profile payday. The background checks for a first-round draft pick invite too much scrutiny. Vargas prefers the shadows. I offer him a chance to stay in them. He might decide to keep the kid and kill you anyway. Then the dead man's switch activates, Deacon said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. He set the device next to the stack of photos. The screen remained dark. I drafted an email to the Coast Guard tip line, Deacon explained. I attached the high-resolution files. I included the GPS coordinates of the Greyhound track and the registration numbers of the rusted barge. The email sits in my outbox. If I miss my check-in, the files go to the authorities. Henderson tapped his fingers against the table. You play a dangerous game for a kid you met 2 days ago. The corporate machine expects me to walk away, Deacon said. Fletcher expects me to file a clean report on a shortstop in Atlanta and ignore the rot in Fort Myers. I spent 20 years ignoring the rot. I let the machine chew up desperate kids because I needed the health insurance. Deacon leaned forward, ignoring the fire in his shoulder. I refuse to let Vargas steal this kid's life over a landscaping debt. Henderson studied Deacon's face. The retired umpire read the bruised skin, the exhausted eyes, and the absolute stubborn resolve. He recognized a man who pushed all his chips into the center of the table. You need a neutral location, Henderson said. Vargas avoids the car lot during the day. Deacon took another drink of the bourbon. The muscle guards the front door. I need a place where he feels comfortable, but public enough to prevent an immediate execution. The Seminole Casino down the highway, Henderson said. Vargas holds court in the VIP lounge every Thursday night. He likes the high-limit tables. He likes the free drinks. The tribal police run tight security. Metal detectors at every entrance. The mechanics leave the steel pipes in the truck. Thursday night. Deacon checked the clock on his phone. That gives me 24 hours to set the board. He brings Marcus, Henderson warned. The guy with the neck tattoo. The collector. Marcus stays close to the boss. He carries a concealed weapon, metal detectors or no metal detectors. The tribal cops look the other way for the high rollers. I account for Marcus. Deacon finished his bourbon. He set the empty glass next to the photographs. He gathered the 8x10 prints, tapping the edges against the table to align the stack. You have the physical contract? Henderson asked. Vargas holds it. He keeps it close to the vest. Deacon slid the photos into a manila folder. I make him bring it to the table. We execute the trade in the open. You want to trade a digital memory card for a physical contract inside a casino. The exchange rate favors the bold. Deacon slid across the cracked vinyl. He stood up, locking his left knee to take the weight off his bad right ankle. The transition sent a jolt of pain up his spine. He grabbed the manila folder with his good hand. I need a fresh suit, Deacon said. You look fine, Henderson said. I bleed through the collar on this one. Corporate buyers don't wear bloodstains to a negotiation. Chapter 14. Slot machines chimed a frantic, chaotic rhythm across the sprawling gaming floor. Neon lights strobed in blinding sequences, reflecting off rows of polished chrome and tinted glass. The Seminole Casino operated as a sensory assault vehicle, designed to disorient and extract cash. Frigid air conditioning poured from massive ceiling vents, dropping the ambient temperature to a sterile chill. Deacon dragged his right boot across the thick, geometric patterned carpet. The fresh charcoal suit acted as armor. The tailored wool hid the heavy bandages wrapped around his ribs. The crisp collar concealed the purple bruising on his neck. He projected the image of a high-end corporate buyer, masking the physical ruin underneath. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a familiar, agonizing spike into the fused bones of his ankle with every step. He ignored the pain, keeping his gaze locked on the elevated mezzanine at the back of the room. A velvet rope cordoned off the VIP lounge. 2 tribal police officers stood near a polished brass podium. They wore dark uniforms and heavy-duty belts. Deacon reached the checkpoint. He pulled the silver corporate expense card from his breast pocket. He slapped the plastic onto the brass podium. I need a table, Deacon said. He kept his voice flat, demanding and impatient. I have a meeting with Mr. Vargas. Chicago front office. The older cop glanced at the platinum card. He took in the tailored suit and the bruised cheekbone. High rollers carried their own unique baggage. The cop unhooked the velvet rope. Mr. Vargas sits in the back corner, the cop said. Table 4. Deacon stepped past the barrier. The atmosphere shifted the moment he crossed the threshold. The manic chimes of the slot machines faded, replaced by the hushed clatter of clay chips and the low murmur of serious money. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over green felt tables. Cigar smoke hung in the chilled air. He spotted the target. Vargas held court at a private baccarat table. The mobster wore a dark silk suit. A massive gold watch gleamed on his wrist. He sipped a clear drink from a lowball glass. A stack of black $100 chips sat piled on the felt in front of him. Marcus stood 2 feet behind Vargas's chair. The giant enforcer wore a tight black dress shirt. The jagged neck tattoo crawled above his collar, marking him as a creature of the street, trapped in a high-end lounge. Metal detectors at the front entrance kept the firearms out of the building. Marcus relied on his sheer mass and brutal reputation in this room. Deacon closed the distance. He did not wait for an invitation. He pulled out the padded leather chair directly across from Vargas. He sat down. Marcus tensed. The enforcer took a half-step forward. His thick hands curled into fists. Vargas raised a hand, stopping the giant in his tracks. The mobster studied Deacon. A cold, reptilian calculation flashed behind his dark eyes. He recognized the scarred jawline from the high school parking lot photographs. "You lost your way, Scout," Vargas said. His voice carried the smooth cadence of a seasoned predator. "The penny slots sit out on the main floor. This table requires a $10,000 buy-in." "Chicago covers my buy-ins," Deacon said. He reached inside his jacket. Marcus twitched, anticipating a weapon. Deacon pulled a thin, manila folder from the interior pocket. He tossed the folder onto the green felt. The paper slid across the table, stopping against Vargas's stack of black chips. "Open it," Deacon said. Vargas stared at the folder. He took a sip of his drink. The ice clinked against the crystal glass. He set the drink down and flipped the manila cover open. The top high-resolution photograph hit the casino lights perfectly. The image showcased the massive steel barge tied to the Bonita Springs seawall. Halogen work lamps illuminated the deck. The diesel forklift sat centered in the frame. A massive wooden crate, bearing the Yamaha Marine logo, hovered in the air. Vargas stood in the foreground, smoking a cigar, his face captured in terrifying, indisputable clarity. Vargas did not flinch. He did not gasp. He stared at the photograph for a long, silent moment. He reached out and flipped to the second picture. The close-up shot highlighted the registration numbers on the rusted barge. 12 boat motors, Deacon said. He leaned back in his leather chair. $360,000 in stolen merchandise. Interstate transport. International smuggling. The Coast Guard hunts that specific barge every single night. Marcus leaned over Vargas's shoulder. The enforcer saw the photos. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray beneath the neck tattoo. "You brought a camera to a swamp," Vargas murmured. He closed the folder. He rested his manicured hands flat on the table. "You demonstrate terrible judgment, Mr. Deacon. You carry a death wish in that briefcase." "I carry a corporate mandate," Deacon corrected. "My front office drafted a plan. We intend to select Bobby Reyes in the first round. We intend to hand him a check with 6 zeros. The kid has bad mechanics," Vargas said. A hollow laugh escaped his throat. "He strikes out looking. He strikes out because a loan shark holds a predatory sports management contract over his head," Deacon said. "You squeeze the brother's landscaping debt. You force the kid to tank. You want him to fall into the independent leagues. You want 90 cents of every dollar he earns in Mexico for the next 10 years. I provide financial guidance to a struggling family." "You run a shadow operation," Deacon said. "Chicago hates shadow operations. My boss hates external variables. You represent a massive, unacceptable variable." Vargas leaned forward. The silk suit crinkled. The smooth facade began to crack. "You think a billion-dollar baseball team cares about a local debt? They buy the contract. They pay me off. They refuse to negotiate with a man moving stolen boat motors," Deacon lied. The bluff required absolute, unshakable conviction. The background checks trigger a federal audit. MLB security involves the FBI. The whole deal brings a massive spotlight onto your entire empire. You hate the spotlight. I hate corporate scouts. I offer a simple trade, Deacon said. A classic squeeze play. You shred the physical contract. You release Bobby Reyes and his brother from the debt. You walk away from the kid completely. Vargas narrowed his eyes. And in exchange, I hand over the digital memory card, Deacon said. I forget I own a camera. You keep your smuggling route. You keep the Caribbean black market. The Coast Guard continues to search empty water. Silence settled over the baccarat table. The distant chimes of the casino floor filtered through the velvet ropes. Marcus shifted his weight, glaring at Deacon with undisguised murder in his eyes. I employ men who solve problems like you, Vargas said. His voice dropped to a harsh, guttural whisper. I snap my fingers, you vanish. The swamp swallows your rental car. The alligators eat the evidence. You run a business, Vargas. Calculate the math. Deacon tapped his index finger against the manila folder. You kill a corporate scout. The local police tear this town apart. The state troopers join the hunt. Deacon reached into his pants pocket. He pulled out his cell phone. He set the device on the green felt, right next to the folder. The screen remained dark. I drafted an email to the Coast Guard tip line, Deacon explained. I attached the high-resolution files. I included the GPS coordinates of the old Greyhound track. The email sits in my outbox. If I miss my check-in, the files go to the federal authorities. The dead man's switch activates. Vargas stared at the dark screen of the cell phone. The threat of federal prison weighed heavier than the pride of a local mobster. The stolen boat motors generated massive, untraceable revenue. The Reyes contract represented a risky, high-profile gamble. The leverage favored the kid. The fear finally breached Vargas's eyes. The mobster understood the trap. You trade a multi-million-dollar federal grand theft case for a single high school shortstop, Vargas said. He shook his head. The exchange rate makes 0 cents. Chicago wants a clean draft board. I get paid to clean it. Vargas picked up his lowball glass. He finished the clear liquor in a single swallow. He set the glass down with a heavy thud. He looked at Marcus, then back to Deacon. I need 24 hours to consider the deal, Vargas said. You get 12, Deacon said. He grabbed the manila folder and the cell phone off the felt. He slid them into his jacket. Tomorrow at noon. We meet at the high school baseball diamond. You bring the physical contract. I bring the digital memory card. We execute the trade in the open. Deacon pushed his chair back. He stood up, locking his left knee to take the weight off his bad right ankle. The transition sent a jolt of fire up his spine. 12 hours, Vargas, Deacon said. Do the math. He turned his back on the mobster and walked toward the velvet ropes. Chapter 15. Tires hummed against the cracked asphalt of Route 41. The vibrations traveled up the steering column, rattling the bones in Deacon's forearms. He kept the speedometer 10 miles under the limit. Adrenaline from the casino bluff drained from his system, leaving a hollow, aching void in his chest. His right ankle registered a dull, rhythmic throb. Ty Cobb's ghost drove invisible spikes into the scar tissue with every rotation of the rental car's axle. The neon lights of pawnshops and liquor stores smeared across the windshield. Traffic thinned out, leaving the desolate stretch of highway to long-haul truckers and insomniacs. Deacon signaled a right turn. He bypassed the main entrance to his motel. He steered the Chevy Malibu into the adjacent lot of a defunct waffle diner. Weeds pushed through the shattered concrete of the diner parking lot. Deacon killed the engine. The silence pressed against his ears. He grabbed the small penlight from the center console and shoved it into his pocket. He unlatched the door and swung his legs out. Pain flared up his right leg the moment his shoe hit the pavement. He gritted his teeth, leaning his weight against the fender. He gave the joint 10 seconds to acclimate to the load. A chain-link fence separated the diner from the motel courtyard. A rusted gap in the wire provided a narrow passage. Deacon slipped through the opening, snagging the shoulder of his suit jacket on a jagged edge of metal. He ignored the tear. The motel swimming pool glowed a toxic, artificial blue in the center of the courtyard. Dead palm fronds floated on the surface, casting jagged shadows against the plaster walls. The ice machine in the breezeway hummed a mechanical drone. Deacon stayed out of the light. He hugged the shadow line of the second-floor overhang, placing his footsteps deliberate and soft. He reached the corner of the building. His room sat 3 doors down. A wedge of yellow light spilled onto the concrete walkway. Deacon stopped. The door to room 114 hung ajar. The heavy deadbolt rested in the unlocked position. Splintered wood framed the strike plate. He pressed his back against the stucco wall. The rough texture snagged the wool of his suit. He took a slow breath, controlling the rapid beat of his heart. He slid toward the open door, inching his face toward the gap. Chaos reigned inside the cheap room. The mattress lay on the floor, gutted like a fish. Tufts of synthetic foam spilled onto the industrial carpet. The neck tattoo goon stood in the center of the destruction. The massive man wielded a hunting knife with a serrated edge. He slashed the lining of Deacon's leather suitcase, dumping shirts and slacks into a tangled pile. The goon moved with terrifying, mechanical efficiency. He did not search. He destroyed. He flipped the heavy wooden dresser. The cheap particle board shattered on impact. He kicked the television screen, sending a shower of glass across the bed frame. Deacon watched a drop of sweat roll down the man's thick neck, tracing the edge of the tribal ink. The goon wanted the burner phone. He wanted the SD card with the telephoto images. He wanted the leverage. The goon paused. He tilted his head, listening to the drone of the ice machine. His grip tightened on the handle of the hunting knife. Deacon did the math. The torque wrench sat in the trunk of the Malibu. He stood unarmed in a tailored suit, favoring a shattered ankle. The man inside the room had 100 pounds of muscle and a 7-inch blade. A confrontation ended with a gutted scout bleeding out on a cheap synthetic rug. Survival dictated a retreat. Deacon pushed away from the stucco wall. He did not turn his back. He moved in reverse, keeping his eyes on the wedge of yellow light. He retraced his steps along the shadow line of the overhang. The ice machine covered the subtle scrape of his leather shoes on the concrete. He reached the gap in the chain-link fence. He squeezed through the rusted wire, stepping back onto the abandoned diner lot. The heat of the night wrapped around him like a wet blanket. He reached the rental car and slid into the driver's seat. He did not touch the brake pedal. He reached under the steering column, turning the ignition key with a quiet, practiced motion. The engine caught. He shifted into drive and let the idle speed carry the vehicle out of the lot. He did not flip on the headlights until he reached the main highway. Vargas wasted 0 time. The mobster bypassed the 24-hour negotiation window. The destruction of the motel room delivered a clear message. The squeeze play worked, but it triggered an immediate violent counterattack. Deacon drove north. He needed a safe harbor, a place invisible to local enforcers. A sprawling, illuminated sign appeared on the horizon, glowing like a beacon in the Florida night. Walmart. He steered the Chevy into the massive, sprawling parking lot. Rows of sodium lights bathed the asphalt in a harsh, clinical glare. Dozens of vehicles dotted the outer edges of the lot. Rusted RVs with sun-faded awnings sat next to beat-up minivans with cardboard duct taped over broken windows. The desperate and the displaced claimed the concrete acreage as a temporary sanctuary. Deacon found a spot between a towering camper van and a commercial box truck. The massive vehicles shielded the Malibu from the main thoroughfare. He threw the transmission into park and killed the engine. The air conditioning died, leaving the cabin to the mercy of the lingering heat. He unbuttoned his collar and ripped the silk tie from his neck. He reached under his seat and engaged the lever. The seat back fell into a rigid recline. The steering wheel crowded his chest. The center console dug into his hip. He reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers brushed the cold plastic of the stolen burner phone. He pulled the device out and placed it on the dashboard. The digital evidence sat secure. The SD card with the telephoto images rested in his wallet. He shifted his weight, trying to find an angle that did not agitate his ankle. Pain radiated up his shin, a constant low-voltage current. He rubbed the scarred tissue through the fabric of his trousers. "You want to play the corporate game, Vargas," Deacon said to the empty car. "We play the corporate game." A set of headlights swept across the back window of the Malibu. Deacon froze. He dropped his hand from his ankle and grabbed the door handle. The approaching beams illuminated the interior of the car, casting long, frantic shadows across the dashboard. The engine noise grew louder, a heavy, throaty idle closing the distance between the rows of parked cars. He braced his good leg against the floorboard. He watched the rearview mirror. The reflection captured the grille of a lifted truck. The truck rolled past the box truck. The headlights blinded him for a fraction of a second. Deacon held his breath. "Don't stop," he whispered. "Keep rolling." Chapter 16. A sharp, metallic ping echoed across Hammond Stadium. The leadoff hitter fouled a 90-mile-per-hour fastball straight back into the chain-link backstop. The baseball struck the wire mesh 3 inches from Deacon's face. The heavy metal fence rattled, vibrating down to the concrete foundation. Deacon did not flinch. He kept his hands resting in his pockets, staring through the diamond-shaped gaps at the field. The regional championship game transformed the minor league complex into a pressure cooker. Thousands of locals packed the grandstands, screaming for a title. Brass instruments blared from a high school marching band in the right field bleachers. The noise washed over the concrete concourse in chaotic, relentless waves. Deacon stood in the prime scouting real estate directly behind home plate. He wore the same charcoal suit from the casino. A night spent curled in the driver's seat of a rented Malibu left the wool wrinkled and stiff. A dark stain marred the left cuff. The bruised collarbone burned with a deep, radiant heat. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a familiar rusty spike into his fused right ankle. He shifted his weight, grinding his leather sole against the peanut shells littering the concrete walkway. Dozens of corporate evaluators flanked him. They held radar guns and expensive stopwatches. Miller, the Detroit cross-checker, occupied a folding chair 10 feet away. The men chattered about spin rates and draft slots. They treated the teenagers on the dirt like prize cattle. They ignored the human collateral. Vargas deployed his own version of scouts to the ballpark. Deacon spotted 3 men wearing dark polo shirts stationed at the primary exits. They lacked clipboards. They carried heavy muscle mass and scanning, predatory eyes. The cartel boss established a perimeter. He wanted a front-row seat for the destruction of a generational talent. Down on the dirt, the inning shifted. The local team took the field. Bobby Reyes emerged from the home dugout. The 18-year-old phenom dragged his bat across the concrete step. He wore a pristine white uniform, but the fabric looked heavy on his shoulders. He walked toward the on-deck circle with the posture of a man walking to a gallows. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes. He stopped near the chalk line and knelt in the dirt. He fumbled with the weighted donut, sliding the iron ring over the barrel of his composite bat. Deacon read the body language. The kid looked empty. The weight of Hector's debt crushed the life out of the swing. Vargas demanded another strikeout tonight. The mobster demanded a public, undeniable failure on the biggest amateur stage in the state. If Bobby tanked the championship game, the corporate scouts packed up their radar guns and crossed his name off the master list forever. The independent leagues waited. Bobby stood up. He swung the weighted bat in a slow mechanical arc. The explosive, terrifying rotational violence vanished. He looked like a frightened amateur. Deacon stepped closer to the chain link. He gripped the wire mesh with his right hand. "Don't do it, kid," Deacon whispered into the roar of the crowd. Bobby turned his head. The kid's gaze swept over the scouts, searching the faces behind the backstop. He found Deacon. The 18-year-old stared at the battered corporate buyer. The purple bruising on Deacon's face told a clear story. Bobby understood the toll. He recognized the violence. The kid gave a microscopic shake of his head, communicating absolute surrender. He planned to step into the box and watch the fastballs cross the plate. He planned to save his brother. A massive shadow fell over Deacon's right shoulder. The ambient temperature seemed to drop. The smell of the stadium vanished, replaced by the scent of stale peppermint gum and raw adrenaline. "You missed your checkout time, old man." Deacon turned his head. Marcus stood less than a foot away. The jagged neck tattoo pulsed with the heavy beat of the enforcer's heart. The giant wore a loose, untucked black linen shirt. He kept his hands near his waistband. He wedged his massive frame between Deacon and the exit aisle, trapping the scout against the steel fence. "I prefer the view from the stadium," Deacon said. He kept his voice level, refusing to match the intimidation. "Mr. Vargas sent me to collect the rent." Marcus leaned closer. His shoulder brushed against Deacon's ruined collarbone. The contact sent a jolt of fire through the nerve endings. He canceled the 12-hour negotiation window. "We execute the trade right now." Vargas lacks patience. He lacks a sense of humor. The marching band erupted into a chaotic fight song. The crowd roared as the opposing pitcher threw a warm-up strike. Marcus used the noise to his advantage. He shifted his weight and pulled the edge of his untucked linen shirt back a fraction of an inch. The harsh stadium lights reflected off gunmetal. A matte black semi-automatic pistol rested in an inside-the-waistband holster. The grip looked worn and lethal. Marcus kept his right hand hovering over the weapon. "You see it," Marcus rumbled. "I see a federal weapons charge," Deacon said. "You see a hole in your stomach." Marcus dropped the hem of the shirt, concealing the firearm. "I put a bullet in your gut, right here." The crowd screams. People run. The panic creates a stampede. I walk out the front gates while you bleed to death on peanut shells. You watch too many movies. Deacon turned his body, facing the giant. You pull that trigger, the tribal police lock this stadium down in 10 seconds. They put you in a cage. I take my chances with a cage. You take a dirt nap. Marcus held out his left hand, palm up. Hand over the digital memory card. Give me the phone. Then we walk out to the parking lot together. Mr. Vargas has a van waiting. Deacon glanced at the field. Bobby Reyes stepped into the batter's box. The kid dug his back foot into the clay. He kept his hands low. The setup looked identical to the deliberate strikeout at Terry Park. The pitcher wound up. The corporate scouts raised their radar guns in unison. The trade requires the physical contract, Deacon said. The deal changed, Marcus said. The enforcer stepped into Deacon's personal space, pinning him against the wire mesh. Mr. Vargas keeps the paper. We keep the kid. You hand over the photos, and you get to keep breathing. That represents a generous offer. Vargas called the bluff. The mobster refused to surrender the golden goose. He relied on the brutal, immediate threat of violence to crush the extortion attempt. He believed Deacon valued his own life more than a stranger's baseball career. He misunderstood the opponent. I brought the phone, Deacon said. Smart choice. Give it to me. Deacon reached into the inside pocket of his charcoal suit jacket with his right hand. He moved with deliberate, exaggerated slowness, keeping his hands visible. He wrapped his fingers around the stolen burner phone. He pulled the plastic rectangle out of his jacket. Marcus reached for the device. Deacon snatched his hand back, keeping the phone out of reach. He pressed the power button with his thumb. The screen illuminated, casting a blue glow against the chain-link fence. "I drafted a specific email in the Walmart parking lot this morning," Deacon said. He kept his eyes locked on the neck tattoo. "I set the destination address to the Regional Coast Guard Command Center and the Miami FBI field office." Marcus frowned. The giant's hand twitched toward his waistband. "Hand it over." "The attachments feature 12 stolen Yamaha blocks on a rusted barge," Deacon continued. "The text includes the GPS coordinates of the Bonita Springs drop site." Deacon tapped the screen once. The email application opened. The drafted message sat in the outbox, ready for transmission. "You hit that button, I kill you right here," Marcus hissed. Panic bled into the enforcer's gravelly voice. The mobster's plan disintegrated. "You kill me, the email still goes through," Deacon said. "Vargas loses the Caribbean pipeline. He loses $500,000 in inventory. The federal government seizes his car lot. He spends the rest of his life in a concrete box." Deacon held the phone up, positioning the screen between their faces. The blue send icon pulsed in the top right corner. "Tell Vargas the squeeze play is over," Deacon said. Deacon drove his thumb down and pressed the icon. Chapter 17. A 90-mile-per-hour fastball smacked into the catcher's mitt with the crack of a bullwhip. "Strike," the home plate umpire yelled. The goon did not flinch at the sound. He kept the concealed pistol pressed hard against Deacon's ribcage. The heavy steel barrel dug through the fabric of the charcoal suit jacket. "Cancel the message," the goon said. His gravelly voice barely registered over the stadium crowd. Deacon kept his hands visible. He gripped the chain-link backstop. "I can't do that. The data sits on a federal server. The Coast Guard tip line uses an automated relay. They have the GPS coordinates. They have the container numbers." The goon tightened his grip on the gun. "I'll put a hole in you right here. You shoot me, you go to prison," Deacon said. He maintained a flat, bored tone. Adrenaline spiked in his veins. A metallic copper taste flooded his mouth. 3,000 people sit in these bleachers. A dozen television cameras record this field. 2 off-duty deputies eat hot dogs by the third base dugout. You pull that trigger, they lock down the stadium. Nobody leaves. Sweat beaded along the edge of the man's neck tattoo. He blinked, breaking eye contact for a fraction of a second. "Your boss has a bigger problem," Deacon said. "The feds love a marine theft bust. They confiscate everything. Dealerships, bank accounts, boats. You have 3 minutes before the Coast Guard boards that barge. If you run now, you might beat the raid." The goon stared at the glowing screen of Deacon's phone. The sent confirmation remained visible on the glass. He made the calculation. Loyalty to Vargas fought against basic survival. Panic fractured his street-level confidence. He lacked the authority to make the call. He operated as a blunt instrument, and blunt instruments need direction. "Tell Vargas," Deacon said. "Tell him the squeeze is over." The goon pulled the gun away from Deacon's ribs. He shoved the weapon deep into his waistband and pulled his loose shirt over the grip. He turned his back and pushed his way through the crowd standing in the main aisle. Deacon let out a breath. He leaned his weight against the chain-link fence. His bad right ankle screamed in protest. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a rusty spike into the scar tissue. He ignored the pain. He watched the massive man climb the concrete stairs. Vargas sat in row 10, directly behind home plate. A premium seat for a premium target. The mobster wore a crisp white linen shirt. 2 more men flanked him, creating a wall of muscle. Vargas chewed on an unlit cigar, watching the pitcher on the mound. The goon reached row 10. He leaned over the metal railing. He whispered a frantic message into Vargas's ear. Vargas grabbed the man by the collar. He demanded an explanation. The goon pointed a thick finger at the backstop. Vargas locked eyes with Deacon through the chain-link fence. Deacon did not look away. He offered a cold, dead stare. He raised his phone, tapping the glass screen with his index finger. The mobster read the body language. The bluff evaporated. Vargas realized the weary corporate scout held actual, devastating leverage. Vargas dug a smartphone from his pocket. His thumb swiped across the glass. The screen illuminated his face with a harsh blue light. The arrogant confidence drained from his features, replaced by absolute terror. A faint mechanical whine drifted over the outfield wall. Deacon turned his head toward the highway. The Tamiami Trail ran parallel to the stadium. The whine escalated into a piercing wail. Multiple sirens overlapped, creating a chaotic chorus of emergency vehicles. Red and blue strobe lights painted the evening sky, reflecting off the underside of the low-hanging clouds. The convoy raced south toward Bonita Springs. The crowd in the stadium murmured. Fans turned their heads away from the diamond, pointing toward the flashing lights on the horizon. The distraction rippled through the bleachers. The home crowd stomped their feet on the aluminum benches, creating a deafening, rhythmic thunder. The vibration shook the concrete foundation of Hammond Stadium. Vargas did not look at the highway. He understood the math. The Coast Guard intercepted the barge. The millions of dollars in stolen Yamaha engines were gone. The FBI would raid Suncoast Motors before midnight. The mobster scrambled out of his seat. He shoved past a teenager, holding a tray of sodas. The drinks spilled across the concrete steps, splashing sticky syrup over the stairs. Vargas didn't look back. He sprinted up the aisle, heading for the exit tunnels. His 3 muscle men followed close behind, a chaotic stampede of desperate criminals abandoning their territory. They vanished into the shadows of the concourse. The oppressive weight lifted from the stadium. The humid air felt lighter. Deacon looked back at the field. The towering stadium lights flickered to life. Massive halogen bulbs hummed, fighting the encroaching dusk. Harsh artificial light flooded the diamond, casting sharp, distinct shadows across the infield clay. Bobby Reyes stood in the on-deck circle. The kid watched the exodus in row 10. He stared at the empty folding chairs. The physical transformation happened in an instant. The slump vanished from his shoulders. The terrified, hollow look in his eyes disappeared. The invisible chains shattered. The public address system crackled. Static hissed through the speakers. Now batting for the Eagles, center fielder number 27, Bobby Reyes. Bobby dropped the weighted donut from his practice bat. The heavy metal ring clanged against the dirt. He rolled his neck. He stepped toward the batter's box. The opposing pitcher towed the rubber. A lanky left-hander from Naples High. Deacon evaluated the kid earlier in the week. The pitcher had a long wingspan, generating strange arm angles. He hid the ball behind his hip. Most high school hitters struggled with the deception. Bobby Reyes was not most high school hitters. Bobby dug his cleats into the chalk line. Dirt flew across the plate as he established his footing. His hand stayed high, resting the aluminum bat near his ear. The terrified kid vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating athlete. A scout from the Red Sox sat in a folding chair to Deacon's left. The man wore a faded polo shirt. He raised a radar gun, aiming the lens at the mound. Deacon gripped the steel wire of the backstop. He analyzed Bobby's stance. Flawless balance. Weight distributed across his hips. He tracked the pitcher's release point. His eyes stayed level. His head did not move. These were the unteachable mechanics. The million-dollar traits the Chicago front office demanded. The pitcher went into his wind-up. He kicked his leg high. He delivered a fastball low and away. Bobby took the pitch. He did not flinch. Ball one, the umpire barked. The catcher tossed the ball back to the mound. The pitcher wiped sweat from his forehead. He checked the runner on first base. He set his feet and threw a breaking ball. The curveball dove into the dirt. The catcher dropped to his knees, blocking the wild pitch with his chest protector. The ball ricocheted toward the on-deck circle. The umpire called time. The catcher retrieved the ball, wiping the mud off the leather seams. Bobby stepped out of the box. He took a deep breath. He tapped his cleats with the barrel of the bat. He stepped back in. The pitcher toed the rubber. He shook off the catcher's first sign. He nodded at the second. He threw a high fastball. Bobby swung hard. He fouled the ball straight back. The sphere smashed into the protective netting, inches from Deacon's face. The impact rattled the steel frame. Deacon didn't blink. He kept his eyes on the kid. The pitcher set his feet for the fourth pitch. He threw a slider. The ball spun toward the inside corner. Bobby's hips fired. The violence returned to his swing, but he channeled the chaos. He kept his hands inside the path of the ball. His back shoulder stayed level. The torque generated from his core whipped the barrel of the bat through the strike zone. The aluminum met the leather. The crack sounded like a rifle shot. The explosive noise silenced the restless crowd. The Red Sox scout dropped his radar gun. The plastic device clattered against the concrete floor. Deacon didn't watch the ball clear the center field fence. He knew the trajectory. He recognized a major league swing. He let go of the chain-link fence. He pulled the corporate smartphone from his jacket pocket. He navigated to his contacts. He pressed Fletcher's name. The phone began to ring. "We're drafting Reyes," Deacon said to the ringing line. "The kid is clean." Chapter 18. Heavy steel turnstiles clattered in a rapid metallic rhythm. Deacon shoved his weight against the rusted crossbar, forcing his way out of Hammond Stadium. The deafening roar of the home crowd echoed against the concrete concourse at his back. Bobby Reyes rounded the bases, soaking in the glory of the home run. Deacon dropped the corporate smartphone into his jacket pocket. He severed the connection to Chicago without waiting for Fletcher to speak. The front office required zero additional input. He needed the paper. The stadium parking lot stretched out like a chaotic ocean of stamped steel and hot asphalt. Rows of dusty SUVs, rusted pickup trucks, and local sedans formed a massive, disorganized maze. Towering halogen lights cast sharp yellow cones over the grid, creating deep pockets of impenetrable shadow between the vehicles. Deacon dragged his ruined right ankle across the blacktop. Ty Cobb's ghost demanded a heavy toll for the adrenaline spike. A jagged line of pure fire shot from his heel, straight into his kneecap. He locked his jaw, refusing to break his stride. He tracked the neck tattoo goon. Marcus moved with frantic, destructive energy. The giant enforcer shoved past a group of teenagers loitering near the ticket booth. He sent a kid sprawling onto the concrete. He did not look back. He sprinted toward the far south corner of the lot, aiming for the VIP section. Deacon cut a diagonal path through the maze. He bypassed the main pedestrian walkways. He squeezed his broad shoulders between the hot metal quarter panels of parked cars, shaving precious seconds off the pursuit. The wail of emergency sirens escalated in the distance. The shrill, overlapping pitch drifted from the Tamiami Trail. State troopers and local deputies raced south toward the Bonita Springs drop site. The auditory pressure blanketed the Florida night, ratcheting up the tension. Deacon reached the perimeter of the VIP parking zone. He spotted his rented Chevy Malibu sitting under a weak, flickering street lamp. He diverted his path, aiming for the rear bumper. He dug the plastic key fob from his pocket and hit the release button. The trunk lid popped upward. The dim cargo light illuminated the gray carpet and the spare tire well. He reached inside and wrapped his right hand around the cold, dense metal of the torque wrench. The heavy steel cross offered a familiar, brutal comfort. He slammed the trunk shut with his left hand, wincing as the impact sent a jolt through his bruised collarbone. He turned back toward the VIP section, letting the tire iron rest against his thigh. A string of curses shattered the humid air. Deacon moved toward the sound. Two massive yellow school buses sat parked near the exit gate, their diesel engines rumbling in a low, vibrating idle. Exhaust smoke drifted across the gravel shoulder. Marcus stood trapped in the narrow gap between the buses. The enforcer clutched a cellular phone to his ear. He punched the steering wheel of a locked black Ford F-250 with his free hand. The heavy blow dented the quarter panel. Vargas took the keys. The mobster secured his own escape in a separate luxury vehicle, abandoning his primary muscle to deal with the fallout. The boss took the lifeboat and left the crew on the burning deck. "Pick up the phone," Marcus yelled at the dark glass of the device. Deacon stepped into the gap between the yellow buses. He blocked the only exit path. He rested the blunt end of the torque wrench against the loose gravel. The metal scraped against the stones. Marcus snapped his head up. The ambient light caught the sweat pouring down his face. The jagged tribal ink on his neck looked dark and bruised. The giant dropped the phone. The plastic device shattered on the asphalt. "Get out of my way," Marcus rasped. "Vargas left you the bag," Deacon said. He kept his voice flat, projecting the words over the rumble of the diesel engines. He panicked. "The feds hit the barge 10 minutes ago." He grabbed his own keys and ran. "You hold the extortion files. You take the fall." Marcus took a step forward. His hands curled into massive fists. "I break your neck, I take your rental car. You take my car, you drive straight into a roadblock." Deacon tightened his grip on the steel cross. He did not flinch. He leaned into the bluff, using the distant sirens as his background track. "Listen to the highway. The Lee County sheriffs have the Tamiami Trail exits barricaded. The Coast Guard raid triggered a RICO sweep. They want the whole network. They want Suncoast Motors. They want you." The giant hesitated. The street-level confidence evaporated, replaced by the frantic calculation of a trapped animal. He heard the sirens. The overlapping wails painted a picture of absolute, inescapable authority. The mobster abandoned him. The feds wanted him. "I bust through the fence," Marcus said. "You hit the fence, you wreck the suspension. You spend the rest of your life in a concrete box," Deacon countered. He shifted his weight, raising the tire iron an inch off the gravel. "I offer a trade. You give me the Reyes file. I give you a clean path out of the county." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You carry a tire iron. You don't carry a badge." "I carry the map," Deacon said. "I spent the last 2 days charting every backwater access road behind this stadium. I know a dirt access trail that cuts behind the drainage canals. It dumps you onto Interstate 75 north of the roadblock. You make it to Tampa before the sun comes up. You disappear. You lie." "I work for a billion-dollar baseball team," Deacon said. "I want the kid free and clear. I get the contract, I stop caring about your existence. Vargas gave you the files to clear out the safe. Hand over the paper." Marcus weighed the options. A fight required time. A fight drew attention. The old corporate scout carried a heavy steel wrench and the dead-eyed stare of a man with nothing left to lose. The mechanics from the dealership warned Marcus about the brutal efficiency of the man in the charcoal suit. A shattered ribcage slowed down an escape. The sirens grew louder, cresting the overpass a mile away. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the low clouds. The ticking clock shattered the enforcer's resolve. Marcus reached inside his dark linen shirt. He bypassed the concealed pistol in his waistband. He pulled a thick, crumpled manila envelope from an interior pocket. The paper looked bent and sweat-stained. "You tell the cops you never saw me," Marcus demanded. "I tell them Vargas ran the whole show alone," Deacon agreed. Marcus threw the envelope. The heavy packet fluttered through the humid air, landing in the gravel at Deacon's feet. Deacon did not look down. He kept his eyes locked on the giant's chest. He stepped sideways, clearing the gap between the two rumbling school buses. He left the exit path wide open. "Follow the dirt road behind the third base bleachers," Deacon said. "Keep your headlights off until you hit the pavement." Marcus did not waste a single second. The giant lunged forward, sprinting past Deacon in a blur of panicked motion. The heavy work boots pounded against the asphalt, fading into the shadows of the stadium perimeter. The enforcer vanished into the Florida night, chasing a phantom escape route. Deacon stood alone between the idling buses. He leaned the torque wrench against the yellow steel bumper of the nearest vehicle. He bent his knees, fighting the sharp, agonizing protest from his right ankle. He scooped the crumpled manila envelope from the dirt. He stood up and pulled the top flap open. A thick stack of legal documents rested inside. The paper felt heavy, printed on expensive watermarked stock. He pulled the pages into the yellow glare of the stadium lights. Exclusive sports management and representation agreement. The bold text confirmed the extortion. Deacon flipped to the final page. The signature line featured a messy, terrified scrawl. Bobby Reyes signed his life away, trading his future for his brother's landscaping debt. Vargas executed the paperwork with a heavy black pen. The leverage existed in the physical realm. The trap required this exact document to function. Deacon gripped the thick stack of paper in both hands. He twisted his wrists in opposite directions. The expensive legal stock resisted for a fraction of a second, then tore with a sharp, satisfying rip. He tore the contract in half. He stacked the pieces, ripping them again into quarters. He reduced the predatory agreement to a handful of jagged, meaningless confetti. He turned his hand over. He let the shredded paper fall into a puddle of oily water pooling near the rear tire of the school bus. The toxic sludge swallowed the documents, soaking the ink and dissolving the nightmare. Chapter 19. The corporate smartphone vibrated against the hard plastic of the center console. Deacon sat in the driver's seat of the rented Chevy Malibu. He kept the transmission in park. Freezing air blasted from the dashboard vents, hitting his sweat-soaked charcoal suit. The chill raised goosebumps on his arms, but it did nothing to numb the deep, radiating ache in his left shoulder. He stared at the bruised knuckles on his right hand. The skin looked raw and scraped from the alleyway brawl behind the dealership. The phone continued its relentless, buzzing dance across the plastic. The screen glowed bright blue in the dim cabin. The caller ID displayed Fletcher's name. Deacon reached out and grabbed the device. He swiped the green icon and brought the speaker to his ear. 112 miles an hour, Fletcher shouted. The front office executive bypassed standard greetings. His voice boomed through the small speaker, echoing off the windshield. The background noise of the Chicago headquarters sounded electric. Keyboards clattered. Voices cheered in the distance. The analytics department threw a party. He crushed it, Deacon said. He leaned his head against the headrest, closing his eyes. The exit velocity broke our internal modeling, Fletcher continued. The man sounded out of breath, riding a wave of pure corporate adrenaline. We watched the regional live stream on the big screens in the conference room. The kid turned on an inside slider. He hit it over the light tower. A mammoth shot. He found his timing, Deacon offered. He found his swagger, Fletcher corrected. The general manager loved the bat flip. The owner loved the distance. We draft him. We lock him down. Miami and Atlanta backed off when he struck out yesterday. We swoop in and steal a franchise cornerstone. Deacon opened his eyes. He looked out the window. The stadium parking lot remained a chaotic mess of fleeing vehicles and flashing emergency lights. The wail of sirens continued to drift up from the Tamiami Trail. State troopers dismantled Vargas's empire a few miles away. The mobster fled. The enforcer vanished. A predatory sports contract dissolved into toxic sludge in a puddle behind a school bus. Deacon bled for that home run. He fought men with steel pipes. He broke the leverage. What about the formal reprimand, Fletch? Deacon asked. He kept his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The email in my inbox mentioned a termination clause. It mentioned my health insurance. A dismissive scoff crackled over the cellular connection. I deleted the file 10 minutes ago, Fletcher said. We wiped the slate clean. The front office demands results, Deacon. You delivered a result. I told the general manager we needed patience with this kid. I told him we needed to let the Florida talent pool settle. Deacon gripped the steering wheel. The leather felt cold under his bruised hand. Fletcher rewrote history in real time. The executive took credit for the patience he never had. He ignored the threats he issued just 24 hours prior. You told me to cross him off the whiteboard, Deacon said. I motivated you, Fletcher countered. The corporate spin required zero effort from the man. You spend too much time in the weeds, Deacon. You dig into local drama. But you stuck to the baseball today. You evaluated the talent. You verified the swing. Good job keeping your eye on the prize. The machine operated with absolute, terrifying blindness. Fletcher cared nothing for Hector Reyes and the failed landscaping business. The Chicago front office cared nothing for the stolen Yamaha boat motors, the Coast Guard raid, or the violent extortion ring. They saw a baseball launch into the night sky, they measured the trajectory, and they opened the checkbook. The human cost meant nothing. The blood on Deacon's collar went unnoticed. The algorithms demanded data. Deacon fed the beast. We wire the signing bonus on Monday, Fletcher said. I need you in Atlanta by tomorrow afternoon. We have 2 high school shortstops running the 60-yard dash. I want stopwatches on both of them. Deacon rubbed his scarred jawline. Ty Cobb's ghost drove a fresh spike of pain into his fused right ankle. The health insurance policy remained intact. The pills kept arriving in the mail. He bought his mobility with another piece of his soul. I booked the morning flight, Deacon said. That is what I like to hear, Fletcher said. Keep evaluating the assets, Deacon. Let the data do the talking. The line clicked dead. Deacon pulled the phone away from his ear. He stared at the blank screen for a long moment. He tossed the device onto the passenger seat. It landed on top of the canvas duffel bag. He reached toward the dashboard and shifted the transmission into drive. He steered the Malibu out of the parking space, leaving the stadium lights and the sirens in the rearview mirror.